The story opens in a VIP delivery room filled with urgency. Nurses rushed about, casting healing spells on the woman, the faint glow flickering in their trembling, exhausted hands. The mother, however, lay completely unbothered, leisurely flipping through a magazine, her eyes fixed on perfectly sculpted six-pack abs, ignoring the entire childbirth process as though it were someone else's problem. But her patience finally ran out, and she demanded to know why the little brat hadn't come out already. The sound was so fierce it sent a jolt of fear through the two attendants standing at the core of the delivery. At last, our MC let out a loud cry, and the attendants triumphantly announced the birth of a son. They hurried to congratulate the patriarch, the head of the house. In an instant, the room erupted with excitement. Smiles spread across every face, laughter echoed through the chamber, and one by one, people stepped forward to honor Patriarch Liu, offering their most heartfelt wishes. The patriarch, however, was not swept away by the celebration. His sharp eyes narrowed as he immediately demanded to know where Shikwin was. When told that the young master had gone out to Paradise Club for some business, his face darkened, spitting out the words and calling him a useless waste. Suddenly, a piercing scream ripped through the delivery room, snapping the patriarch's attention back. The mother froze in shock while a blinding light burst across the chamber, shaking even the patriarch and sending the two attendants stumbling back. At the center of it all was our MC, his innocent laughter echoing, yet his small body radiated a terrifying aura, power swirling around him like a storm wrapped in cuteness. Within the newborn stirred an unusual force, one brimming with pride, carrying the weight of vengeance and the glory of triumph. A lowly peasant, once crushed like a weed under the feet of these self-proclaimed noble clans, had now awakened an unprecedented divine sense of rebirth, and ironically had been reincarnated into the very same noble family that had once treated him like a doormat. The expected notification appeared, a system alert announcing the sudden awakening of the divine sense. It revealed his power, divine point sense, 50 points, power rank C grade, tier 3. He stared in stunned silence, realizing that the strength he had just gained as a newborn was something he had never even approached at his peak in his past life. The announcement left the entire room speechless. The patriarch's staff slipped from his hands as he beamed with pride, as he declared that the Liu clan had given birth to a once-in-a-generation genius, a child with an innate divine sense, unrivaled and peerless in the world. His face lit up with unrestrained joy as he laughed, already envisioning how the family's power would grow through this child. Our MC let out an adorably cute giggle, but behind that tiny laugh, something wicked was brewing. His eyes burned with vengeance, and a cold smirk curled on his face. Heaven had given him a second chance to take everything the Liu family owned, and he was already plotting to make sure they'd never know a moment of peace. The servants mistook his giggle for a blessing, remarking that the young master smiled without ever crying. To them, it was an auspicious sign, proof that he had been born under a noble fate. They eagerly congratulated the patriarch, who, laughing proudly, vowed to pour the full strength of the Liu clan into raising this child, so that one day he would lead them to heights even greater than anyone could imagine. Meanwhile, our MC wore an evil grin. Who would have imagined that in just 6 months since that Liu family bastard had killed him, what he had only dreamed of would actually come true? Even as a newborn, he already seemed a step ahead of the entire Liu family, quietly plotting things only he could understand. Memories of his time in the womb surfaced. In the first rebirth month, the attendants had urged the mother to take her supplements, completely unaware that something far greater was already happening. As soon as the premium essence was infused, the embryo activated, divine sense awakened, and its growth sped up like lightning. By then, he had already reached D-grade divine sense, just as an embryo. It was obvious why commoners could never match the power of noble clans. Even as a fetus, he had already surpassed levels that most commoners could only dream of reaching. Most civilian divine sense users barely even came close to this level, even after risking their lives countless times. Even the Academy's ability classifications had never mentioned such accelerated growth. By the second rebirth month, his spark of life came under threat, pressed by the pull of the original embryo that tried to absorb him. But he devoured whatever tried to consume him and claimed its place. The system confirmed it then. The power of lightning thrived by devouring essence to grow even stronger. The lightning-type divine sense was one of the rarest elemental abilities, and our MC had already gained supreme divine sense powers. Not only was he going to end the bloodline of the Liu family, but the same nobles who had treated his past self like an ant were now going to nurture him with their very best resources. He could only imagine the day he would tear everything down, savoring the thought of the clan's shocked faces when that moment finally came. By the third rebirth month, during the fetal stage, the system marked another milestone. His lightning divine sense had advanced to the beginner stage at level D. His progress was steady and assured. The scene shifts to the floor, where clothes and heels of a woman lay scattered, while the actual woman, the mother of our MC, was lying on the bed beside a yellow-haired man doing workouts to stay healthy. Inside the womb, our MC listened to all those workout noises. Through the conversation, he realized that his mother was actually working out with another man, and she wasn't afraid of her husband's possible return. The truth unfolded. It was a political marriage, and both of them were merely playing along. The Liu family only desired the unique medical constitution of her body to strengthen their lineage. In hushed tones, the yellow-haired man questioned whether the child truly carried the Liu clan's blood, but the mother cared only about her workouts, striving to achieve greater heights. Within the womb, our MC cursed the nobles as disgusting people, irritated by their voices, as the noise disturbed his absorption of essence. Lightning crackled from his tiny index finger, piercing through the gates of heaven and burning the tool of the yellow-haired man. By the 6th month of rebirth, the continuous supply of premium essence might have caused a premature birth, yet our MC had already reached D grade without lifting a finger. This was the medical body constitution that his mother had spoken of during the workout. Because of it, he had reached the peak of D rank effortlessly. The scene shifts outside, where a man glared at the mother's stomach, his gaze ultimately piercing into the eyes of our MC, as if to learn when he would be born. From our MC's point of view, a wave of disgust washed over him with anger, and memories of another life rose. He remembered how his so-called Liu brother had fed his comrades to a monster, watching as the beast tore them apart. He remembered the despair of soldiers sacrificed for the benefit of the noble Liu family, while that Liu bastard cared only about the treasure that could be formed by feeding the monster. The ugly Liu bastard laughed evilly, taunting the protagonist for overestimating himself, and how the Liu family tricked him, killed him, and made him into a donut for the monster. His last, most painful thoughts had been of his little sisters. Another fragment of memory surfaced, tender yet heartbreaking. He saw himself petting his little sister's head with a smile, promising to return after finishing his job so the family could eat first. He had grabbed his bag and left the house, leaving his 3 sisters behind. The only question that lingered in their young hearts was when their big brother would return home. Power surged once more. Fueled by the rage of being separated from his sisters, our MC unleashed a fist strike from within the womb itself, slamming straight into the handsome man's ugly face. Thus was born the name of this technique, fetal stage, divine sense-style fist training, a rebellion of raw willpower that sent the ugly bastard flying far from the mother, while she writhed in pain as her unborn child continued to punch from within. The air in the room grew suffocating as the patriarch, his expression grim, barked an order for a nurse to examine the fetus. The nurse trembled, then announced in shock that our MC's talent was beyond comprehension, an anomaly among anomalies, developing at a speed far greater than any infant. He was already on the verge of birth. The delivery room erupted into chaos as everyone realized the child was resisting. Panic spread quickly, growing more intense as the birth drew near. Meanwhile, inside the womb, our MC felt a surge of disappointment. Just as he was about to surpass D grade, fate decided he would be born. Unwilling to let the chance slip away, he desperately drew in every drop of energy around him, absorbing it with a greed that shook the very womb itself. Who knew? Perhaps a shocking surprise awaited him at the moment of his birth. Sensing the growing storm within her, the mother urgently commanded that the finest delivery team be summoned at once. When our boy turned 1 month old, the Liu family held a grand and lively banquet. The Southern Zhao Li clan and the Southern Zhao Fang clan both presented rich gifts to congratulate our boy's first month. The patriarch sat in delight, enjoying the music, while our little brat rested comfortably in the nanny's arms, watching everything adorably. The scene shifted deeper into the Liu family estate, where one after another, guests stepped forward with courteous smiles. Each congratulated Master Liu on his grandson, wished the child a glorious future, and presented gifts to honor the occasion. Yet amid the greetings, the baby's eyes turned sharp. His gaze locked onto a man named Chen who had just congratulated his parents. In that instant, memories surged, and he realized the truth. This was the very man who had separated him from his beloved sisters in his past life. In a silent storm of vengeance, our boy swore that this blood debt would be settled here and now. Memories of his past life rose like fire. He saw his 3 younger sisters, their wide eyes fixed longingly on a single piece of cake. At that same moment, his past self had received a phone call. On the other end, the same Chen scolded him harshly for being late, warning that the team had already gathered and threatening him with the consequences of breaching the contract. Even after he apologized, Brother Chen coldly reminded him that if not for the rumors of his desperation to buy property, a mere D-rank like him would never have been offered such a private job. Before hanging up, Brother Chen snapped at everyone to work harder, stay sharp, and left no words of comfort. the protagonist thanking brother Chen countless times. After ending the call, he had gently patted his sisters, smiling with pain, and promised to return soon. Then he walked away, leaving his 3 little sisters behind. That very night, under the full moon, a scene unfolded. A massive portal opened, and a figure stepped forth from the glowing rotoscoping cigarette. It was Brother Chen. He greeted young Master Liu, who asked only for the progress report. Chen assured him that the targets had already been inside for some time and should be sufficiently fed by now. Young Master Liu's lips curled into a creepy smile. He praised Chen's efficiency and declared that his father's investment in him had not been wasted. Then, with cold pride, he revealed the true purpose of their scheme, spanking his wife with a twisted gesture. This time, they were here for Mrs. Liu. The scene shifted. Mrs. Liu entered, her face sharp with disdain. She mocked the Liu family, declaring they were raising nothing but bastards, then revealed the truth. The Liu clan only wanted to climb higher. Otherwise, they would never have spent a fortune marrying into her family. All 4 of them stepped into the portal. Their confidence shook when they encountered a lone commoner outside, gasping for breath. A Liu bodyguard seized him, but the man shouted frantically, warning them not to go further. He cried that a terrifying beast lay inside, that everyone else was already dead, and begged them to escape. Young Master Liu's voice dripped with doubt, wondering aloud how such a lowly man had survived at all. Without enough feed, the medicinal treasure would not form. Chen, unnerved, muttered that he didn't understand why these nobodies were still alive. At their meager D rank, it made no sense that any of them had endured this long. Suddenly, a deafening explosion split the air. The group staggered back in shock as the beast drew near. Young Master Liu's attention sharpened instantly. As they advanced, their eyes fell on the beast, marked by a scar across its leg. Beside it stood his past life self, battered and exhausted. Rage and confusion flared in young Master Liu's eyes. Brother Chen roared in fury, demanding what trash dared to damage young Master Liu's property and who had injured the beast. Recognition struck like lightning. Brother Chen spat out Yi Chen's name, his voice filled with disbelief. Yi Chen looked up, his heart lifting with joy, believing Brother Chen had finally brought reinforcements to save him. Back at the banquet in the present, our boy's resolve burned hotter than ever. With an evil grin, he swore again that the blood debt would be settled here and now. His tiny body wriggled, and soft, muffled sounds escaped, followed by an adorably cute giggle. The sound was enough to draw Chen's attention, almost as if our boy himself were inviting Chen to hold him. Brother Chen's expression faltered, his pride humbled by nothing more than the giggle of a newborn. Young Master Liu leaned forward with a twisted pride, his face both proud and sinister, declaring in a booming voice that it was the greatest honor imaginable, that his son wished for Brother Chen to hold him. He proclaimed that this was the highest glory Chen would ever receive in his lifetime. Chen bowed deeply with trembling gratitude as he received the young master into his arms, treating the moment as both an honor and a reward. Yet the instant our boy was placed against his chest, a sudden spark of lightning burst forth from the baby. Startled beyond reason, Chen let out a terrified scream, and in his panic his arms failed him. The child slipped from his grasp and crashed to the polished floor. The hall froze. Gasps of horror erupted from every direction as the Liu family's treasured heir fell like a shattered jewel across the marble tiles. Guests recoiled in disbelief. Nobles stared wide-eyed. Even the musicians paused their music in disbelief. The patriarch and the child's parents were struck pale, their faces locked in disbelief at what had just befallen their young master. Chen stood paralyzed, his body drained of color, staring at our boy on the floor with terror etched into his face until our boy burst out crying, each wail stabbing fear deeper into Chen's heart. The patriarch's wrath thundered across the room like a storm. His palms slammed against the table, shaking the hall as his voice roared, demanding how Chen dared allow the Liu family's most precious treasure to be dropped. Chen collapsed to his knees, slamming his head against the floor again and again, stammering in desperation that it had been the young master's own doing. But before he could finish, Father Liu spat curses like venom, calling him a dog courting death. His boot struck Chen viciously to the ground. Broken and pale, Chen rose unsteadily, then dropped to his knees and began pounding his forehead against the floor repeatedly, begging for mercy, swearing eternal loyalty, and vowing to give his life for forgiveness. He insisted he would never harm the young master, that he had been overwhelmed by honor and lost control, and offered to surrender all his wealth and treasures if it would help the young master recover. But his pleas fell on stone. Father Liu's verdict was merciless, useless, fit only for death. He ordered Chen dragged out and beaten until nothing remained. Chen sobbed his thanks for the punishment, still trying to prove his loyalty. Meanwhile, our boy writhed in the nanny's arms, crying in pain, then flashed Chen a sharp, evil grin, almost mocking. The sight stunned Chen. Our boy's cry suddenly rose even louder, freezing Chen's breath and hollowing out whatever courage he had left. The patriarch ordered the child carried away, demanding he be examined at once. His fury boiled over, his voice echoing through the hall as he declared that with the Liu family status, a useless dog like Chen offering his so-called treasures was nothing but filth, and the Liu clan stood far above needing such scraps. With those final, thunderous words, the patriarch turned sharply and stormed out of the hall in fury. Father Liu, still seething, crushed a glass in his fist, shards cutting into his skin as if they were nothing. In a fit of rage, he kicked Chen once more and roared for him to be dragged out, beaten to death, and fed to the dogs. Chen's screams for mercy were smothered beneath the soldiers' iron grip as they hauled him away. With a final furious snarl, Father Liu thundered at the attendants, demanding what spectacle they thought they were watching, before ordering the music to resume and the feast to continue as if nothing had ever happened. Our boy, meanwhile, told himself that if he wished to grow quickly, he needed to devour every drop of vital essence, to use every breath of strength. The doctor soon reassured the patriarch that the child was untouched by harm, even praising his astonishing physique and rare, monstrous talent. Our boy let out soft giggles and burps, his tiny body wriggling in delight, and at the sight of this, the patriarch's grim face lit up with joy, overwhelmed with pride that the young master was safe. Yet beneath those adorable sounds, our boy's thoughts turned inward. His greatest worry was not his family's pride, but the three sisters of his past life, bloodied, broken, and lost. His resolve hardened like steel. He swore to grow strong, so strong he would rise on his own legs. To do that, he needed the highest quality essence he could steal from his mother. With that thought, he turned toward his grandfather, his lips mumbling cutely, his expression clear. He was hungry. The patriarch wasted no time, commanding his daughter-in-law to nurse the child at once, and ordering that she be fed spirit medicine so her strength could endure. The mother's voice trembled with exhaustion. She had already fed our boy earlier, her body drained, yet she was given no mercy, no moment to rest. The patriarch lectured her with ice and thunder, declaring that for the future of the Liu family, for the honor of her clan, she must endure like a beast. Her lips quivered, but she was left speechless, crushed beneath the weight of his decree. Our boy latched on with ravenous hunger, devouring his meal with merciless force. His mother gasped, her body trembling under the relentless pull of his mouth, pain forcing broken cries from her lips. At last, unable to bear it, she whispered hoarsely to her own son, calling him a monster, begging him to slow down. But the grandfather, cold and unmoved, demanded the attendants bring restorative soup and force her to drink more, so she could continue to feed the child's ever-growing appetite. Day and night blurred. She fed him constantly, even as she bathed, even as she tried to go about her daily tasks. Her body and spirit wore down until her patience snapped. At last, crushed by exhaustion and fury, she shouted at our boy, her voice cracking with despair, demanding to know whether she owed him some endless debt from a past life. 3 months had passed since the banquet. Our boy, though still tiny, could crawl so quickly that the caretaker had to chase after him while she looks exhausted and stressed. Despite his age, he had already advanced to Thunder Element Divine Sense, Intermediate Grade C. He compared his progress to his past life. Back then, moving from D-Rank Elementary to Intermediate had taken him an entire year, just to gather enough resources for advancement. During that time, he had to take on endless low-level missions, constantly putting his life at risk and suffering countless injuries. Each level and divine sense breakthrough demanded twice the essence and twice the effort. Yet now, he had reached C-Rank Intermediate in only 3 months, simply by drinking his mother's milk. Our boy crawled into the dining hall where his parents and grandfather were eating. The sight of him sent the Liu household into chaos. The grandfather scolded the servants angrily, demanding to know who had left the young master unsupervised and what would happen if he got hurt. Trembling and pale, the caretaker fell to her knees, insisting that the young master crawled too quickly and she simply couldn't keep up. The father then teased his mother, asking if the child was after milk again. The mother, looking exhausted and terrified, admitted that she needed our boy taken away. For 3 months, he had clung to her day and night without giving her a moment's rest, and she desperately needed a break. Our boy, however, thought only of efficiency. He reminded himself that time could not be wasted. He needed to continue supplementing. Then came the moment that stunned them all. Our boy pulled himself upright. His legs wobbled, his tiny body trembled, but he managed to stand. Shock rippled through the household as eyes widened in disbelief. Just as everyone was still surprised, he suddenly jumped onto his mother's balloon, clinging to her for milk. His mother, meanwhile, grew irritated, only wanting to finish her meal for once in peace. Another maid knelt in shock at the sight of the young master standing on his own. The butler declared that the boy's constitution was extraordinary and his rate of development unmatched. With solemn pride, the grandfather announced that, According to Liu family rules, the time had come to assign the boy a personal death servant now that he could stand. The butler bowed in acceptance and rushed to make the arrangements, while the boy continued to drink from his mother's chest. The scene shifted to an underground prison, where the butler reported to the grandfather about the remaining 2 children. The courtyard echoed with screams. Still clinging to his mother's balloons, our boy noticed as many injured children lay collapsed on the ground. Suddenly, he recognized one of the contestants. His heart jolted. It was one of his sisters from his previous life. Explosions shook the air as our boy unleashed his thunder power on his sister's opponent, knocking her opponent out. As soon as her enemy fell, his sister then hurried to grab the food scattered on the ground and started devouring it. Panic surged through the child, but he could only hope his actions didn't seem suspicious. His mother, meanwhile, stood there in confusion, her hair frizzed and clouded from the boy's sudden burst of power. The grandfather, instead of being angry, burst into laughter and praised the child's courage. He declared that such fearlessness could inspire true fighting spirit, even claiming that his grandson was stronger than his own son had been at that age. The father, meanwhile, could only click his tongue in irritation. Our boy sighed inwardly. Thinking a child's identity truly was useful, he needed no explanation. Adults supplied the reasoning themselves. The butler hesitated, uncertain if the duel still required a conclusion after the young master's interference. But the grandfather dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. The girl, he decided, was enough. She was to be cleaned up, taught proper etiquette, and presented to the young master as his attendant. The day began with our boy lying happily in his crib. The butler then turned to the girl that was the young master's sister from the past life and declared that from this day forward, she would be the young master's personal death servant. He told her that if she wished to survive, she must protect the young master and take responsibility for guiding him as he grew up. In short, whatever the young master ordered, she had to obey. She nodded silently, and the butler went on, explaining that she must stay by the young master's side at all times to serve him. Once the young master fell asleep, she was expected to go to the Master Arts Hall for training. Saying this, she left. As she stepped into our boy's room, she quietly shut the door and slowly walked toward the crib. Something was hidden behind her back, her eyes burning with deadly intent, while our boy lay there mumbling softly. Then, she revealed what she had been hiding: a knife. Our boy froze in shock, struggling to understand what she was trying to do. All he could manage were muffled sounds in his baby tongue, while panic and awareness surged through him. Inside, his thoughts raced, but his tiny, undeveloped vocal cords refused to form the words he so wanted to say. Her intent was merciless. She accused him of killing her brother and vowed revenge, raising the knife to strike, unaware that our boy before her was, in fact, her brother reincarnated. As she swung, our boy dodged out of the crib and tumbled to the floor. She glanced toward his new position, and he moved again. Again determining his new position, she focused her wind element divine sense. A green aura flickered around her and the blade. Our boy's senses sharpened, and in that instant he realized she was wielding the wind element divine sense. There was no time to hesitate. He forced his mind and body to work together, blending divine sense martial training with his lightning powers. As he ran and dodged her attacks, the room became a whirlwind of energy, green aura from the girl, yellow aura from him, dodging her attacks with each movement. The combination of martial training and lightning abilities gave him an edge, but the effort was exhausting. He quickly realized that his tiny infant body couldn't sustain such power for long. Adjusting quickly, he shifted tactics, lowering his output to a low-level thunder element divine sense. He let out a jolt that struck the girl's knees, not lethal but sharp enough to paralyze her advance, causing her to stumble and fall. Holding his breath, he then cut his own finger. As she stared in shock, questioning his actions in her mind, he then revealed he was her brother by writing it on the floor. Standing proudly, he admired his own cleverness of thinking that move. Though he couldn't speak, he opened his tiny arms, waiting for a brotherly hug. But a flaw became clear to him immediately: she was too young to read. As the paralyzing effect faded, she lunged at him again with the knife. He dodged again, his mind racing for a solution. He couldn't even leave the room. If anyone discovered her attempt to kill him, she would face relentless punishment without mercy. The scene shifted outside the room. Jai Chen stood holding a box, his mind drifting back to the day of the celebration. He remembered how the master had thrown him to the floor, warning that if he wasn't still useful to the young master, he would have been killed that day. Injured and trembling, Chen had thanked the master for mercy and vowed from that moment on to work even harder. Later, Master returned to the building. He reminded Chen to focus on pleasing the young master, promising that if he did, the old master would trouble him no more. Back in the present, driven by desperation, Jai Chen revealed his bold plan. He had sold all his assets to buy a rare treasure at a black market auction, hoping it would be extraordinary enough to impress the young master. As he stood outside the room, he heard the young master's voice and wondered what could be troubling him. As he opened the room, he saw the young master dodging the girl's attacks. Catching sight of Jai Chen, the boy gave him a mischievous glare, then swiftly grabbed the girl's hand with one hand while launching a small lightning strike at her head with the other. The girl collapsed, and the boy quickly cut his own arm at the bicep before tossing the knife to Jai Chen. Panicking, Chen questioned the boy's actions in his thoughts. In his fluster, he dropped the black market box he had brought and caught the knife. Seizing the moment, our boy took a deep breath and began crying loudly, sitting beside the unconscious girl. Chen stood frozen, confused and scared, the knife still clutched in his hand. Chaos spread through the Liu residence as the grandfather, father, and butler rushed in at the sound of the child's cries. Alarm filled the grandfather's voice as he demanded to know what was happening. The tension grew heavier when they arrived and saw the girl lying unconscious, our boy wailing, and Chen standing frozen with a knife in his hand. As they drew closer, they saw the child injured, with the knife in Chen's hand dripping with the child's blood. The grandfather's face twisted with fury as he pointed at Chen, shouting that someone had let him in and accusing him of trying to kill his grandson. Terrified and trembling under the accusation, Chen stammered that he had done nothing. The master struck Chen across the face so hard that he collapsed to the floor. His voice thundered as he demanded, if not him, then who? He raged that he had given Chen a chance, only for him to try and harm his son. Staggering back to his feet, Chen hurriedly protested, claiming he had only come to deliver a gift. He insisted it was the girl who had tried to assassinate the young master. According to him, the child had snatched the knife from her, cut himself in the struggle, and then tossed the weapon toward Chen. Our boy, leaning against the girl's body, began to cry even louder. Hearing the wails only made Chen more frightened. Glancing at the old master and the master, his face turned pale. With a trembling voice, he admitted he knew they didn't believe him, but he insisted again that he was telling the truth. The master demanded proof, then struck Chen again with a heavy blow. Desperate, Chen tried to present the gift he claimed to have brought, but it was nowhere to be found. Panicking, he dropped to his knees, frantically searching his pockets as fear overtook him. The old master's fury shifted into a cold amusement as he dismissed Chen's story as a lie. Instead, he praised the girl for protecting the young master. With a wave of his hand, he ordered that she be taken away to rest, and the butler quickly stepped forward to carry out his command. The old master leaned toward his son in private, reminding him of the lessons he had once taught about raising loyal dogs. He scolded him sharply for nearly endangering the family's future hope, then left the matter in his son's hands to resolve. As the old master walked away, Chen remained kneeling on the floor, trembling in fear of what awaited him, while the master glared down at him with burning anger. The master lashed out with a brutal kick, sending Chen flying through the air. Blood sprayed from his face as the master roared that he had given him a chance, yet he still dared to harm the young master. Was he courting death? When Chen, broken and desperate, begged for another chance to explain, the master's fury only deepened. With a cold command, he ordered Chen to be dragged away and thrown to the dogs. Our boy young master let out a quiet sigh of relief as Chen was dragged away. Soon after, the butler approached to tend to the girl, moving to lift her for treatment. In that moment, the young master suddenly remembered the words he had written beneath her. As the butler reached for him to set him aside, the child shook his head desperately, mind racing over what to do next. Even so, the butler gently lifted our boy and set him back into the crib before turning to pick up the girl. The young master's mind raced. Should he knock the butler out with a surge of electricity? But as the butler raised the girl in his arms, our boy froze. Blood was flowing from Yi's stomach, dripping onto the words he had written on the floor in his own blood. The sight of her wound filled him with sudden fear, and he worried about what had truly happened to her. As the butler carried Yi away, he ordered someone to clean our boy's room. Once they were gone, a sigh of relief escaped the young master. The immediate danger had passed. But he quickly reminded himself that more important matters awaited. With that thought, he gathered his resolve and jumped out of the crib. The scene shifted to the massage room, where our boy's mother lay on the table with only a towel draped over her hips. The masseuse poured lotion into his hands and began working across her back. Just then, the faint sounds of slurping and gulping echoed as our boy approached. Hearing him, the mother froze in dread, instantly terrified he would start draining her again. She quickly turned, her voice rising in frustration as she shouted at him, demanding why he had come again and how his appetite could be so endless. Once again, our boy latched onto his mother's balloon even as she was receiving her massage, leaving her in an awkward position. Irritated, she questioned him, asking how long he planned to keep this up. Meanwhile, our boy ignored her complaints, focusing instead on accelerating his growth. He resolved that once he could speak clearly, he would finally explain his situation to Yi when she returned. A week after the Chen incident, the boy's growth had already sped up, reaching the stage of a 3-year-old. Sitting on the bed, he practiced speaking by counting out loud. 1, 2, 3. Suddenly, Yi crept up behind him with dangerous intent in her eyes. Noticing her presence, he quickly turned around and with a proud smile introduced himself as her brother, standing tall despite his small body. He went on to ask if the cake he had bought for her tasted good. As Yi looked at the boy, she caught a fleeting glimpse of her brother in him. The moment then slipped into her memories of the past. She recalled how in the past her brother had gathered her and both of her sisters, Yi, Shuang, and San, calling them over for cake. At his words, the three sisters quickly rushed to his side from the bed. Their eyes lit up in delight when they saw the enormous dessert, marveling with excitement at how big it was. But just as their laughter filled the room, a harsh voice blared from their brother's phone. It reminded him that the team was already assembled, accused him of neglecting his duties, and warned of the consequences of breaking the contract. As he walked away, Yi, the eldest sister, told the others not to sneak any bites and to wait for their brother to return so they could eat together. Time passed, and the sisters gazed out the window at the sky. Yi noticed a strange reflection of her brother from his past life that seemed to line up, in a small way, with the boy before her now. Back in the present, recognition hit her and tears welled up in the girl's eyes. Trembling, she began to cry even louder. Our boy quickly placed his hand over her mouth, whispering for her to be quiet. They couldn't let anyone hear. She nodded, muffling her agreement. When he finally removed his hand, she wrapped him in a tight hug, whispering, "Brother, is it really you?" He weakly protested, reminding her that his body was still that of a child, and that he could barely breathe under her embrace. After she let him go, he took a moment to catch his breath. Then, unable to hold back, he started bombarding her with questions, shaking her continuously as he spoke. He wanted to know how she had been captured and brought there, where Shuang and San were, and how she had discovered that the Liu family was behind his death. His words tumbled out so fast that they overlapped, one spilling over the next. Overwhelmed by his shaking, she grew dizzy and begged her brother to stop. Her voice then softened as memories of the past surfaced. Tears filled her eyes once more as she remembered the day he had gone out for what seemed like forever and never returned. In her memory, the room was dim. All three sisters sat with growling stomachs, glancing anxiously toward the window. Questions swirled in their minds. One wondered why their brother hadn't returned yet, while another feared that he had been gone so long that he might not want them anymore. With determination, Yi took charge. She told her sisters to stay home while she went out to the place where he usually took his missions, hopping to find him. But instead, she discovered information about his disappearance. She remembered the fury of a woman confronting Chen, the one who had given the mission. She accused him of luring her husband into danger and demanded to know why he hadn't returned. Was he dead? She demanded answers, her voice trembling with anger. Without a word, Chen kicked her aside. Another voice rose of a man claiming he had seen him enter the otherworld portal with Master Liu. He said that his fiancée and companions had never returned, and in his anger, he urged everyone to beat him to death. While smoking, Chen grew furious. He unleashed his fire ability on the man, who screamed as flames engulfed him, eventually reducing him to ashes. Chen spat out his anger, asking how the man dared spread rumors about Master Liu. Was he tired of living? He went on to insist that the high reward for the mission reflected its great risk. Life and death, he declared, were the responsibility of a divine sense hunter, and those were the rules. Back in the present, the boy nodded in agreement. Chen was the one who had deceived them all, he thought, and now he was finally getting what he deserved. He deserved to die. Then his mind turned to his other two sisters. "What about Shuang and San?" he asked. Hearing his question, she began to cry. Seeing her tears, the boy grew anxious and stressed, wondering what had happened to his sisters. Through her tears, Yi explained to the boy that she had planned to return first, to make sure their sisters were safe, before coming to avenge his death from his previous life. But before she could, a demon tide struck the place where they lived. Another memory surfaced, a battlefield where soldiers rushed toward the West District, shouting that a demon tide was coming as the otherworld portal burst open. Yi stood frozen in the chaos, fear gripping her heart as she thought of her sisters, Shuang and San. Panic took over, and she sprinted toward her home. As soldiers returned from the battlefield, some spoke with relief, saying it was fortunate they had arrived in time and managed to salvage something. Others admitted the demon tide had been far too powerful and the area was left in ruins. When Yi finally arrived, breathless and anxious, she found her home destroyed. Overwhelmed, she broke down in tears as she desperately searched for her sisters. Her fingers bled as she clawed through the debris, crying and trembling, yet refusing to stop. Through her tears, she called out for her brother, sobbing and asking where he was, all while desperately searching for her sisters amid the ruins. Back in the present, both the boy and Yi wept together. Through his tears, he placed a small hand on her shoulder, trying to comfort her. He reminded her that it was the Liu family who had destroyed their home and torn their family apart. But now, heaven had given them the chance to avenge Shuang Shuang and San San. Anger burned in his red eyes as he thought of Chen, the one who had tricked him and so many others into death. He swore that Chen would be the first blood sacrifice. The scene then shifted to the old underground prison, its floors and walls stained with blood. Inside a cell, Chen stood shouting toward Master Liu, insisting he was innocent, claiming he had only come to deliver a gift. Suddenly, a sharp click echoed behind him. Chen spun around in fear. The door to the demon world had opened, and from the darkness, a demon growled. When the massive demon emerged, Chen was paralyzed with terror. He dropped to his knees, trembling so badly that he lost control and peed himself. As the demon drew closer, drooling with its tongue lolling out, he cried and begged it to stop. A blood-curdling scream tore through the prison as the creature loomed over him. Clenching his fist, the boy told Yi that they would turn the Liu family upside down and send all those arrogant villains straight to hell. Yi nodded firmly, agreeing, and promised she would do anything he asked of her. Then, almost casually, she mentioned she still had a mission. When he asked about it, she suddenly scooped him up, saying her mission was to give him a bath. He looked at her nervously, protesting that it wasn't acceptable. After all, he was her older brother. Yi reminded him that in his present life they were not blood siblings. Besides, she was now his personal maid, responsible for his daily needs, and this too was part of her mission. If she failed to complete it, she explained, she would be punished. With that, she urged him along, carrying him in her arms while he squirmed awkwardly. As she carried him out of the room in her arms, he squirmed restlessly, waving his arms and kicking his legs. Looking frightened, he kept insisting that he didn't want a bath. The scene shifted to the bathroom, where he stood stiffly in the tub while Yi prepared a towel. When she approached and said it was time to take off his clothes, he panicked, insisting he could undress himself. Despite his protests, she helped him anyway, then said, "So this is the legendary boy's little thing," while looking at his pencil. Blushing furiously, he flailed and shouted for her not to look, covering himself with his hands. Yi only chuckled at his overreaction, finding his embarrassed, childlike behavior unexpectedly funny. He pouted, red-faced, insisting again that he was her brother while hiding his pencil. Yi reminded him that since she was older and stronger than him now, it was her turn to look after him just as he had once cared for them in the past. Flustered, the boy quickly turned away as she started undressing, covering his eyes and demanding to know what she was doing. The scene shifted to the bathtub, where he sat awkwardly in a small green tub while Yi gently washed him. Her voice softened as she spoke. "Brother, outside these walls people struggle desperately just for a little food. For them, taking a bath is something they could never even dream of. Yet nobles bathe every day, feast on rich meals, and even throw leftovers to the dogs when they cannot finish. Why is it like that?" The boy clenched his teeth, saying fairness will be fought by their own hands. Suddenly, his eyes widened awkwardly, as if silently questioning what Yi was doing. When she moved on to scrub his pencil more thoroughly, he burst out crying in embarrassment, insisting he could wash himself. But Yi shook her head and firmly refused, saying this was part of her responsibility, and she had been specifically instructed to take care of him properly. Back in the room, Yi folded his freshly washed clothes while he lay beside her, looking pale and on the verge of tears. To him, the whole thing felt humiliating. He was clearly her older brother, yet she had just seen him naked like a little child. Burning with shame, he turned away in anger when she questioned what happened. Noticing this, Yi's hands trembled. Her voice wavered, almost in tears, as she told him he was being mean to her, and that he had never treated her like this before. Hearing her words, he sighed, then turned back, stood up, and gently patted her head, claiming that he is not angry anymore and that he had something to ask her. Yi quickly nodded, telling him to ask her anything. He looked at her seriously and asked if she had awakened wind element divine sense abilities. The boy was wondering aloud that if the earliest recorded divine sense awakening happened at 12, then how had Yi awakened so much earlier? Yi looked puzzled and shook her head, admitting she wasn't sure either. Then she explained that a strange panel had appeared in front of her, showing her status. A dialogue box even spoke to her, guiding her on how to awaken her ability. The panel revealed her divine sense, wind element with faintly glowing empty points. As the boy listened, he thought about the panel. Suddenly his own vision shifted, and a panel appeared before him. Unlike Yi's, his was far more detailed. It showed his Thunder Element Super Divine Sense ability, 50 Divine Sense points, a Level 1 Reincarnation ability, and several other effects written out. He realized he had never noticed the dialogue box before and wondered if this mysterious system was the same as the chat box Yi had described. A cold suspicion rose in him. Why did Yi have this system too? How could she awaken her divine sense so young? The fact that both of them possessed such an extraordinary panel couldn't be a coincidence. There had to be something important behind it. Yi's worried expression pulled him out of his thoughts. She asked softly if something was wrong. Forcing himself to relax, he shook his head and replied calmly, though there was urgency in his tone. It was nothing, he said, since she had awakened her ability. What mattered now was that she grow stronger quickly. Yi nodded with determination, promising she would train hard. The boy gently patted her head, telling her that among his sisters, she was the most responsible. A knock at the door interrupted them, drawing both of their attention. A servant stepped in to announce that dinner was ready, adding that Madam had already pumped milk for the young master. Handing over the bottle, the servant left, the door closing with a soft click. Yi then brought the bottle to the boy. The boy's expression turned serious again. Hard work was important, but effort alone wouldn't be enough. They would need to use every resource within the Liu family to grow stronger even faster. Yi looked at him curiously. She was already training as hard as she could, so what other methods could there be to gain more strength? He grinned, a sly glint in his eyes, and told her she would understand if she just opened her mouth. As Yi did so, he pressed the bottle toward her, insisting she drink first. The sound of her gulping filled the room while he stood with his hands on his hips, waiting expectantly for her reaction. Moments later, Yi gasped in surprise as warmth flooded through her veins. She was astonished by how easily power flowed into her body. The boy explained almost reverently his mother's constitution could transform a certain rare beast crystal from the Liu family into something with the same effect as high-level magic beast crystals. What Yi had just consumed was so rare that even a rank subjugation squad struggled to obtain it, something they could never afford in a lifetime of battle. Yet his mother could produce them continuously, like an essence-producing cow, making her seem less like a gentle matron and more like some dark mage. Yet such knowledge was never taught at the Divine Sense Academy. In his mind, he pictured redacted textbooks and hidden family crests. Clenching his fists, he voiced his suspicion. The noble families and the highest rulers were deliberately hiding many truths from the public, feeding only fragments of information so that the masses would fight and die on their behalf. His eyes blazed with determination. These secrets had to be uncovered. Moved by his intensity, Yi pushed the bottle back toward him, urging him to drink as well. But he only pushed it back, insisting the essence was meant for her. She needed to reach her divine sense limit first. With that, he hopped down from the bed, announcing he was going to eat too, while Yi quietly continued drinking behind him. The scene shifted to his mother, who was trying to bathe when he sticked sucking on her balloon, making noisy slurping sounds. Her patience finally snapped, her legs trembled as she raged in fury, demanding to know how he could still be hungry after she had already pumped so much, and how it was all gone so quickly. Servants scrambled in panic. Orders flew through the halls to prepare medicinal meals for Madam, the price of her as the young master is hungry again. At last, the mood shifted one final time. Lightning flared within the boy's mind as he declared in his heart that his revenge began here. Together, he and Yi would overturn heaven's order, tear the Liu family apart, and turn the entire world upside down. Night covered the young master's chamber, shadows stretching across the walls. He crawled on the floor, searching for the gift Chen had brought. Spotting a box under the table, he smiled. Finally, he had found it. Holding it in his hands, he thought to himself that Chen must have given everything he had to save his own life. The Liu family wouldn't value something ordinary, so what could be inside this box? He opened the box, and a flickering light spilled out. Inside, he found a dark, glassy crystal that shimmered faintly in the candlelight. It looked like a magic beast crystal, but he thought, why was it black? Before he could think any further, a dialogue box appeared from the panel above the crystal, and a strange voice echoed from within. It announced that a rare skill crystal had been detected, and absorbing it would grant the thunder element skill, Lightning Spear. His eyes widened. The idea of a skill crystal seemed impossible. He had always thought skills had to be trained and honed through cultivation, so how could they just be absorbed? The dialogue box spoke again. It explained that among various beast races, some evolved species possess special divine abilities. By hunting these beasts, there was a tiny chance of obtaining a skill crystal. An image appeared, showing many beasts attacking a single special beast. The voice continued. After absorbing a crystal, it strengthens the energy circuits of the corresponding skill, allowing skills that normally take years of cultivation to be learned instantly. The young master could hardly believe such a thing could exist. Even more startling was the realization that the voice seemed to respond to his thoughts. The system explained that it resided within his consciousness, which made sensing his mind completely natural. He glared at the dialogue box, warning it not to fool him. He recalled his past life before the apocalypse. He was a high schooler who spent his days devouring web novels and playing mobile games. In those stories, systems always showered their hosts with quests and rewards, letting them increase power, crush rivals, and even overturn fate. He imagined his old self, glued to his phone, immersed in games and novels. Yet here he was, facing a system that revealed nothing but his realm level and divine sense. Frustration boiled over, and he pointed a finger at the dialogue box and said all it does is show his realm and divine sense level this system is useless. The system's tone sharpened. It reminded him that without its guidance, he would never have realized that his ability was reincarnation and he would already be dead. It accused him silently, noting that he was not only ungrateful but even dared to question it. He shifted uneasily, wondering aloud about the system's connection to Yi's system. The system hesitated, flustered, and quickly denied any link, and was even surprised when another system was mentioned. Its tone then hardened, commanding him to stop wasting time and to seize the chance to grow stronger, to prepare for revenge. The boy nodded in agreement. Waving his hand, he dismissed the panel and told himself that he must take every opportunity to strengthen his abilities. He raised the black crystal to his chest, folded his legs, and took a deep breath. As he began absorbing its energy, he could feel it channeling through his body. As he absorbed the crystal's energy, he stood and raised a hand. Power surged through him, sparks sizzled, and arcs of lightning crawled up his arm as he called forth the lightning spear. The energy condensed in his hand, forming a spear of crackling lightning. He realized that a divine sense skill, which normally took 10 years of cultivation, had been mastered in an instant. As he readied the lightning spear to throw, he felt the raw lightning power condensed into the weapon, and that it could be used for close combat or hurled as a projectile. He wondered just how powerful it truly was. Testing it, he thrust outward and threw it. A thunderous bolt tore from wall of his chamber, exploding into the night sky with a deafening bang sound. Hearing the thunderous noise, the old master, the butler, his mother, and Yi came running. The master, clad only in SpongeBob shorts, grumbled about the late-night commotion, complaining that he couldn't even exercise in peace. When they arrived, they saw the young master sitting there, looking tired, with sparks still flickering around him. The master asked who had caused the commotion. The butler explained that while supervising the death servants' training, he had witnessed a lightning strike erupt from the young master's room, and the young master had been the only one inside. The patriarch, the old grandfather, threw his head back in booming laughter as he scooped up the boy. He expressed his pride, marveling that his grandson was not only born with divine sense, but had also mastered divine sense skills in such a short time. Then, muttering a crude compliment, he likened the young master's mother's strong constitution to that of a dairy cow that helped him grow strong. The master was still angry about the boy causing chaos in the middle of the night, only to be scolded by the old grandfather. The patriarch reminded him that his son had exceptional talent. Shouldn't he be proud instead of complaining? What kind of father complains at such a moment? Hearing this, the master in his SpongeBob shorts felt a pang of insecurity, while the old grandfather and the boy laughed together in his arms. The patriarch silenced everyone with his commanding presence. He announced that his genius grandson would take part in the family's annual Otherworld hunting festival ahead of schedule. The hall was dark and silent until the old master broke the stillness, asking the butler if everything was ready. Bowing low, the butler replied that the target team had already set out, with the master's men hidden among them to guide the way. The old master leaned back, a faint laugh curling at his lips. He declared that Liu clan descendants were born to stand above all others, and from childhood they must learn what it meant to rule, while commoners needed to be reminded of their place. Behind him, the young protagonist clutched one of his mother's balloons while sipping essence from another. Yi's gaze, along with everyone else's, shifted toward the old master. The boy froze mid-drink, his mind darkening. What exactly is the Liu family plotting? He thought, cursing them in silence. The old master walked to the center of the chamber, where a gate was set into the floor. Standing at its edge, he spread his arms wide. Instantly, a strange purple lightning energy flared to life, twisting into a spiral until it formed a portal. A heavy thud echoed from deep within the rift as it fully opened. At the back, the boy clung to his mother's balloon, his eyes narrowing. How can the Liu family control interdimensional gates? He wondered in disbelief. Aren't such portals supposed to appear at random? The boy's mind grew darker still. He wondered how much the rulers of this apocalyptic world were hiding from those struggling day by day just to survive. The scene shifted to a wild landscape of forests and towering trees. The young boy continued drinking essence from his mother's balloons, while his mother sat on the floor, trembling on the verge of collapse. She groaned, calling him a brat and complaining that all he ever did was eat nonstop. Behind them, the butler and Yi stood respectfully with bowed heads. The butler spoke with reverence, praising the young master for staying calm even after crossing into another dimension. To him, this composure was proof of extraordinary talent and the true bearing of someone destined for strength. The master raised his hand and pointed into the distance, warning that the squads were drawing near. Suddenly, a thunderous boom echoed, and smoke billowed up from between two mountains. The scene shifted to the source of the smoke. Fighters battled a massive python king and its swarm of smaller pythons. Screams rang out as a severed arm and leg tumbled from the creature's jaws, blood dripping down its fangs. A blade clashed against the serpent's armored hide, but it slid off with a shrill metallic screech, leaving not even a scratch. At the front, the squad captain stood firm, summoning his power to form a shield that barely held back the creature. His face twisted in frustration. Why is there a C-rank one-horned python and even a B-rank python king in a C-rank portal? He thought. These monsters shouldn't even exist there in a portal of this supposed level. Amid the chaos, both the boy and Yi froze in shock. Their eyes widened as recognition struck one of the fighters was Shuang. Against all odds, their sister was still alive. A python lunged at her, fangs bared. With a desperate cry, Shuang braced herself, using every ounce of strength she held both parts of the jaw. Her arms trembled violently as the serpent thrashed, but she refused to let go. Summoning her last reserves of will, she forced the jaws wider and wider until, with a final surge, she tore the python apart. At the front, cracks began to spread across the captain's shield under the relentless strikes of the pythons. Gritting his teeth, he barked an order. Everyone was to fight while retreating, falling back step by step to avoid being overwhelmed. But then danger struck from above. A blurred figure dropped behind the captain, its intent clear, murder. Shuang cried out to warn him, but it was too late. The captain reacted instantly, summoning another shield behind him just as a devastating punch crashed down. The barrier shattered on impact, and the blow sent him staggering back, blood spilling from a deep wound. Still, through sheer grit, he held his forward shield firm, keeping the python's fangs at bay only for a few more time. One of his men roared in fury, purple energy surging around his arm as he charged the murderer. But the murderer turned with terrifying speed, shifting his focus. In a blur, his bare hand sliced clean through the man's arm, then drove straight through his chest, leaving a gaping hole where his heart had been. One fighter, trembling, murmured in disbelief. He had seen this man before. Recognition chilled him to the bone. Kui Xiaorong, the human butcher, a monster long thought executed, standing here alive. Kui grinned, blood stained across his face, laughter echoing through the battlefield. Without a shred of remorse, he lifted the corpse of the man he had just slain and hurled it straight into the waiting jaws of a python. For the protagonist, the sight tore open an old wound. Qiuqing was the man who had severely injured him in his past life, leaving him helpless so the Liu family's master could strike the final, fatal blow. Memories surged like a storm. He saw it all again, a battlefield where Qiuqing hurled a man into a monster's gaping maw, the creature glowing ominously as if on the verge of awakening. Nearby stood the Liu family's master with his wife, watching with cold detachment. Then came the order Qiuqing was to feed the protagonist to the beast as well. At that command, Qiuqing had lunged at him. Blows exchanged. Now again in the present, he thought of Kui Xiaorong's personality, and that he was a murderous demon who had delighted in butchering divine awakeners and ordinary people alike. A mid-tier B-rank powerhouse, once condemned to death, he had in truth been sheltered by the Liu clan and kept as their hidden blade. Far from the battlefield, the boy sat tense, his mind racing with how to save Shuang. His chest tightened as he realized every move he made was under watchful eyes. Beside him, Yi's anger boiled over, her fists clenched so tight they trembled. He knew she wouldn't be able to hold her patience much longer. But how could he possibly save Shuang with so many eyes on them, he thought. He was racking his brain for a way to save Shuang in front of everyone when an idea struck him. Our boy began sucking on his mother's breast with unusual force. Annoyed and frustrated, she scolded him for eating again instead of watching the ongoing battle. But as he sucked too vigorously, he grew dizzy, essence filled his mouth as looked like he was gonna puke. Sensing something was wrong, his mother, seeing his dizzy face, asked what he was doing. Just then he suddenly spit up all over her chest. Startled and disgusted, she cried out, and in her panic, she frustratingly tossed him into the air. Seeing what happened, the old grandfather's eyes darkened with a dangerous glare at the scene. Just then, Yi leapt forward, catching the boy in midair before landing safely. She bent close, worry written across her face, and asked if he was all right. The boy quickly hushed her, whispering that when chaos broke out, she should listen for his signal, and that would be the moment to rescue Shuang. The tension exploded in an instant. The master's hand cracked across the boy's mother's face with a sharp slap, his voice rising with accusations of carelessness. Stunned, she pressed a hand to her cheek, then snapped back furiously that even her parents had never struck her, then how dare he hit her. Rage overtook her, and she lunged at him, one hand transforming into an ice blade. She shouted that she had not married into this family just to be beaten, calling him a skinny dog. The master blocked each charge by summoning earth spikes to block her attack, declaring coldly that she needed to be taught a lesson. From behind, the boy and Yi watched the scene unfold in tense silence, waiting for the right moment. Before the clash could escalate, the old master stepped in using his power to stop them from colliding. Power flared around him, a red aura radiating authority as he forced both to stop. His voice rang out, reminding his daughter-in-law, saying that it was normal for a newborn to spit up, and that as parents they must put the child first instead of letting tempers run wild. His words carried weight as he reminded them that they bore the responsibility for the honor of both families, and therefore they must learn to restrain themselves and control their temper. The domestic storm finally calmed. The boy's mother lowered her weapon, and both parents bowed their heads in uneasy silence. Behind them, the boy and Yi watched as the conflict settled. Yi leaned closer, asking what they should do next. The boy, having noticed movement behind the trees, whispered not to worry and that someone is coming. Following his gaze, Yi spotted it too. Moments later, the butler stepped forward, informing the master of strange movements in the bushes. Everyone's attention turned just as 3 goblins emerged. Seeing the group, the goblins shrieked loudly, like notifying his horde. The master reacted instantly. Earth spikes shot up from the ground, piercing and killing the 3 creatures. The butler quickly identified them as scout goblins, but confusion spread as the master asked that how had they appeared here? Wasn't the area already cleared? The old master sneered at his son, mocking him for neglecting study and spending his time at bars causing trouble. Then, with pointed authority, he explained that a nursing mother's milk carried an essence even more potent than pure high-grade essence. As the mother's body faintly glowed with that energy, the boy protagonist quietly explained to Yi that such essence had a fatal pull on demon beasts and would inevitably draw the high-level ones to them. A goblin horde emerged, led by an elite goblin at peak B level. The creature roared and launched its attack. The old master's expression hardened as he ordered the master and the others to handle the threat. At once, the butler, the master, and his wife unleashed their powers to hold the horde back. Seizing the opportunity, the boy gave Yi a quick signal that the time has come, as he whispered, "Let's go." The moment she caught his signal, Yi scooped the boy into her arms and hurried backward toward the cliff's edge. His eyes widened in fear as she suddenly leapt into the open air, the ground vanishing beneath them. For a heartbeat, the boy panicked, not understanding why she had jumped from such a height. Then Yi's eyes flashed with blue light. She used her power as she lifted him into the sky, flying. At the same instant, the boy felt wind passing beneath his own feet, his body rising as though carried by unseen wings. As the wind carried them higher, the boy glanced at Yi in shock. He asked when she had learned a wind-type flight technique. Yi smiled calmly, answering that she had completed a task assigned by the system, and in return, it had granted her the ability to fly. Hearing this, the boy's face stiffened. With a hesitant tone, he asked what kind of task could have earned such a reward, his expression already twisting awkwardly, as if he suspected the answer before she even spoke. Her smile lingered as she answered with utter seriousness. The task, she explained, had been to give her big brother a bath. For a moment, the air went still, the weight of her words clashing hilariously during their mid-air flight. A memory flashed in Yi's mind, the scene of her carefully bathing the boy protagonist while he sat red-faced, blushing furiously, and crying out in embarrassment. Behind them, the glowing system panel had floated in the air. Its words burning into her memory, it said task completed, giving big brother a bath, and reward acquired wind-type divine awakening flight technique. Back in the present, the boy was left in disbelief. How could something as simple as giving him a bath grant such a rare skill? What kind of ridiculous system worked like this? While he pictured the system as a smug girl in the form of a glowing dialogue box, as if mocking him with its absurd rules. As the scene shifts, we see that Shuang had just slain a giant python, while the guild squad struggled desperately against the endless wave of monsters. Their formation was already in ruins. At the front, a female fighter braced herself behind a massive iron shield, blocking the charge of a one-horned python king. Each strike left cracks spreading across the shield, pieces chipping away as she strained to keep her ground. Her voice broke through the noise, calling out to her captain that the fighters couldn't hold on much longer. Above the clash of steel and roars of beasts, the captain's voice rang out. His gaze locked on to the murderer Qiuqisheng. With a hardened glare, he shouted, demanding to know what Qiuqisheng wanted, insisting that there had never been any grudge between them. Qiuqisheng licked the blood from his hand, his eyes narrowing into a dangerous stare at the captain. He agreed there was no grudge between them. This was simply for his own enjoyment. The screams of the living in his grasp brought him pleasure, and thanks to his master, he still had the chance to continue enjoying this pleasure. The captain's stance grew rigid. He pressed on, demanding to know who this so-called master was, and warning Qiuqing that breaking the guild's subjugation pact was against the law. Qiuqing sneered, brushing off the captain's words with a mocking laugh. Laws, he said, were only chains for lowly commoners. Before the captain could respond, Qiuqing dashed and vanished from sight, reappearing behind a female fighter. His metal claw drove straight through her stomach, blood spraying as her scream broke the chaos. Gasping, she called out for her captain to save her. But the captain stood frozen, terror rooting him to the spot. Qiuqing ripped his claw free, throwing the dying girl into the gaping jaws of the one-horned python. The beast swallowed her whole. The captain's heart sank as he surveyed the battlefield. Their line was shattered, comrades scattered, and fear hung thick in the air. In that moment, he knew the mission was lost. Gritting his teeth, he gave the only order left: scatter, run, and save whoever could still escape. Even Shuang was told to flee. Hearing the command, her courage wavered, and terror gripped her as she stood there. The captain lunged forward, shouting through his frustration and tears, calling Qiuqing a devil and vowing to kill him. His sword sliced the air, but Qiuqing had already vanished. In a blink, the monster reappeared beside another guild member and with brutal speed, used his metal claw holding the member's head, killing him. Shuang, ignoring the captain's order to flee, flung a stone at Qiuqing and screamed that he was a monster and to die. The pebble bounced off his shoulder and only ripping the fabric, doing nothing else. Qiuqing still held the man's head in one hand. When he dropped it, blood sprayed from his claw. He laughed, delighted, and taunted the girl. Pity, he said, that someone awakened so young had to meet him. Proceeded on saying now they would all die. Qiuqing lunged at Shuang, claws outstretched. A sharp metallic ting rang out as shards of a broken sword scattered through the air. In the next instant, Shuang's eyes widened. It was the squad captain. He had stepped in front of her, Qiuqing's claw driven straight through his stomach. With that final act, he saved her from the killing blow. But just as he had done to the others, Qiuqing hurled the captain's body into the gaping jaws of the Python King. Shuang screamed in terror as the beast swallowed him whole. Moments later, bloodied limbs slipped from its mouth and hit the ground with a sickening thud. Among the swarm of lower pythons, the Python King began to glow. Its massive body shrouded in a strange, purple energy that radiated with some kind of power. Qiuqing clicked his tongue in disappointment. He remarked that the Python King still needed to devour more bodies to devour for breaking through and mutating. What a shame, he added. He had planned to take Shuang alive, to turn her into a cute little specimen for his collection. His voice dripped with mockery as he pictured a doll adorned with skulls, a twisted toy for his amusement. His aura thickened. A suffocating wave of murderous intent came from him over the battlefield. Eyes gleaming with cruelty, he raised his hand and promised only death in fear. Shuang, trembling and desperate, broke down in tears. Terrified, she screamed out for her brother. For Yi and San, her cries holded a desperate plea for someone to save her. A lightning bolt split the sky, striking down so close it nearly hit Qiuqing, a proclamation of their arrival. The boy protagonist's voice rang out, assuring her that they were there. As the lightning streaked toward Qiuqing, with a sharp swing of his metallic claws, he deflected the strike, sending it crashing into the ground behind him with a deafening explosion. As Yi and the boy descended onto the battlefield, Shuang froze in shock. Her eyes lit up with recognition the moment she saw Yi. Then, as the boy landed beside her, a vision flickered in her mind for an instant. She saw her brother in him. The boy landed lightly on his feet, sparks of leftover energy still crackling around him from his last attack. He turned toward Shuang and told her he would explain her the situation later, and right now, the current crisis came first. Shuang, however, remained frozen, still uncertain about who he really was. His gaze then shifted to the one-horned Python King. A terrible realization hit him. The pattern was becoming clear. Demon beasts weren't just mutating, they were also evolving by devouring divine awakeners. The thought sent a chill down his spine, especially since nothing like this had ever been mentioned in the Academy's lessons. Qiuqing deflected the lightning bolt and forced out a grunt as he tightened his body, shaking off the lingering shock effect. Wiping a blood-stained finger across his face, he trembled with excitement, his gaze flicking between the boy and the two girls. With a mocking tone, he greeted them, remarking that it wasn't every day he saw the young master with his personal slave. Then, tilting his head, he wondered aloud why they were even here instead of staying safely away while he finished his mission. Why risk themselves for Shuang, a girl he referred as nothing more than food for beasts? His expression shifted as his tone darkened again. But that's not the point now, he muttered. The real question was to him that how is he going to deal with them next? The boy clenched his teeth, realizing that Qiu Yixing was more than just a murderer, he was also a twisted, cunning pervert. Nothing like the brainless, brutal villains from any power fantasy stories he read. Qiu Yixing's intent grew sharper as he threw back his head with a cruel laugh, spreading his arms wide. He sneered that nothing about his mission had changed. Yi, referred to as a lowly maid, would be added to his twisted doll collection, while the young master would be handed over to the big master in exchange for his reward. Suddenly, every metallic weapon scattered across the battlefield began to rise into the air, wrapped in a sinister red aura. One by one, they shot toward Qiu Yixing, merging into his body. His flesh glowed a deep crimson as he invoked his divine awakening. Metal fused completely with flesh and bone, making him a living weapon. The boy's mind raced as he studied Qiu Yixing. The enemy was a B-rank intermediate metal type. He himself was only C-rank peak lightning type. Shuang was about D-rank intermediate in body refinement, and Yi stood at D-rank peak with wind powers. Even with lightning's natural advantage over metal, the gap was far too wide. A direct fight meant certain defeat. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm. If victory was impossible head-on, then he needed a plan. He resolved that Yi and Shuang would need to follow his commands precisely. When he gave the order, both girls nodded without hesitation, their stances sharpening as they braced themselves for what was to come. Qiu Yixing spread his arms wide, red energy crackling violently around him as he mocked that he would protect the young master before suddenly charging forward toward them. His metallic claws extended, sprouting vicious spikes as he charged. Yi and Shuang reacted instantly, dashing in opposite directions to evade the strike. In the center, the boy unleashed his divine martial refinement, merging it with his lightning-type awakening. The battlefield erupted as their powers collided, yellow lightning and crimson-blue energy crashing together and flooding the field with blinding light. As their clash raged, Qiu Yixing's eyes narrowed in surprise. The boy was using divine martial refinement, a forbidden technique that only a rare few could ever master. Memories stirred within him, and his grin widened. He recalled not long ago killing a mere D-rank fighter who had dared to stand against him, someone who had actually managed to fight him toe-to-toe until his master killed the fighter. Qiu Yixing burst out laughing, trembling with excitement. He didn't know how the boy pulled it off. He sneered, eyes blazing, but his imagination tells him that fighter has become you. In his mind, his past memory appeared as if he was no longer clashing with a boy, but reliving the thrill of battling the protagonist's past self. In the heat of battle, the boy gritted his teeth. Even with C-rank lightning powers, his infant body couldn't fully withstand the force meant for an adult physique. He knew he couldn't sustain it for long, and there was only one chance they could take by giving it their all. Urgency surged through him. Turning around, he shouted for Yi and Shuang to move. As Qiu Yixing's attention shifted to Shuang, she seized the moment and hurled a large rock at him. He dodged easily, leaping into the air, but the moment he landed, Yi unleashed her wind ability. A sharp gust whipped the battlefield into a swirling dust, storm, grit, and turbulence clouding his vision and throwing off his balance. Trapped in the storm, Qiu Yixing sneered through the chaos. "Petty tricks," he spat. Beyond the haze, the boy stood at a distance, gathering thunder in his grasp. Sparks danced wildly over his body as a spear of lightning at his full power began to coalesce, every nerve in his body screaming from the strain. With a roar, he hurled it, divine martial refinement fused into a full-power throw. The spear ripped through the dust storm at lethal speed, tearing a clear path toward its target. Qiu Yixing's eyes widened as he realized too late. "Cunning brat," he growled. Even so, Qiu Yixing narrowly dodged the lightning spear. The blinding impact scorched past him, searing one of his eyes, and when it struck behind, the explosion ripped apart a massive section of the battlefield, its sheer destructive power undeniable. Even after the blast, stray arcs of electricity still crackled through the air. But the boy was at his limit. The full-force throw had drained him completely. His legs wobbled as he sat on his one knee. One eye shut tight, his breaths came ragged and heavy, sweat dripping down his face as his small body trembled from the unbearable strain. Qiu Yixing stood firm, blood streaming from his injured eye. He laughed through the pain, the sound low and twisted. His gaze darkened as he vowed to capture the boy regardless, to keep him under his so-called protection, and tearing him away from the two girls, calling them troublesome. With a twisted grin, Qiu Yixing produced a gleaming blade, clearly ready to fight without restraint. In a blur of movement, he dashed toward the two girls, intent on finishing them off. Yi shouted a warning and leapt in front of Shuang, shielding her from the incoming strike. His blow landed with devastating force, hurling Yi backward until she slammed hard against a tree. Qiuqiang glanced down at her and coldly remarked that her turn would come soon enough. His hands morphed into razor-sharp blades as he prepared his next merciless assault. Pressing his weapons down, he pinned Shuang in place, calling her perfect bait for his plans. But at the very last second, a bolt of yellow lightning streaked through the air, deflecting his strike and saving the girl. Snarling, Qiuqiang whirled and lunged at their companion instead, extending a dagger-like finger to impale him. The weapon plunged into the boy's back, wounding him badly, and Qiuqiang hurled him aside while Shuang watched in despair. She broke free, seized her injured brother, and tried to flee. Clenching his fist, Qiuqiang jeered, demanding to know why the boy was in such a rush to meet death. Cradled in his sister's arms, the boy replied through pain that it was actually Qiuqiang who was about to fall. Blood trickled from Qiuqiang's eye as rage twisted his face at the child's nerve. Suddenly, a thunderous voice echoed overhead. The patriarch appeared in the sky, calling him an ungrateful mutt for daring to attack his master, eyes blazing with fury. In that instant, Qiuqiang realized the boy's earlier dazzling strike had been a signal to draw the family's attention. The boy only smiled, confirming the trap he had set. Moments earlier, the family had been racing to the scene. The butler reported that the young master had vanished, and the father grumbled that their son was now able to walk and run, and had chosen the worst possible moment to disappear. The butler added that the servant girl assigned to care for him was missing as well. Enraged, the patriarch ordered his men to search at once. Then they saw the trail of light from the boy's attack and knew where to go. Harnessing his lightning power, the patriarch flew at full speed toward the signal. Arriving at the battlefield, he instantly grasped the situation, and panic flickered in Qiuqiang's eyes. Desperate, Qiuqiang decided his only chance was to seize the boy as a hostage. He charged the siblings at full tilt, but Shuang swung out a staff, planting herself in his path. Channeling her strength, she unleashed a powerful strike that caught him completely off guard. Staggered by the blow, he glared at her in pure rage. At that moment, the boy's father appeared, livid, and denounced Qiuqiang as useless for his repeated failures. He attacked while Qiuqiang tried to flee, shouting that none of it was his fault. But his escape was cut off by one of the area's giant beasts, leaving him cornered with nowhere to run. The creature struck without mercy, giving him no chance to survive. As the dust settled, the serpent began to change, its form evolving into a mighty golden creature. The butler rushed to the children's side, assuring them that the boy was alive despite his injury. The patriarch praised the girls and announced that the serpent was now ready for them to harvest its rare treasure, which would be used to strengthen the boy. In that instant, the boy realized the truth. The noble families were using civilians to feed and evolve these beasts, and after each metamorphosis, they gained new powers. This knowledge had been hidden from commoners at the academy, controlled by aristocratic families who despised the lower classes. With that revelation burning in his mind, the patriarch and his son braced to confront the newly emerged golden creature. Their clash unleashed a massive explosion of crimson energy that tore through the entire forest. From the smoke, two silhouettes stepped forward as the children watched from a safe distance. At once, the patriarch and the boy's father prepared to confront the newly emerged golden creature. Smiling with satisfaction, the patriarch remarked that this harvest had far exceeded his expectations, divine-looking items floating in a halo around him. He instructed the butler to escort the two girls and to send the collection team to gather the remaining materials for storage. With an almost casual tone, the old man outlined his scheme. Low-grade finds would be mixed with scrap and sold to the Equipment Guild as consumables for ordinary divine hunters, while the high-quality treasures would be set in display cases, and their prices inflated so frontline divine teams would bid until their coffers ran dry. He handed the butler a venom sack, harvested only after the silver-horned snake king evolved, ordering it to be sent to the imperial capital so the eldest young master could use it for networking and influence. Throughout it all, the boy's father stood silently, a sly grin etched on his face. Next, the patriarch passed over the silver snake's horn to be taken to auction. As for the rare scales that formed only when the Snake King underwent super-evolution after devouring numerous divine awakeners, he declared they would be forged into protective treasures for his beloved grandson. Hearing these words left the young protagonist stunned. The butler bowed deeply, promising to follow every instruction. Then the boy's father stepped forward, asking his own father to give him the Snake King's essence. The patriarch grumbled, muttering that his son already had a fine wife, and it would be better to let her son share in the boon. Just then, the boy's mother arrived, his sisters lingering in the background. Shock flickered across the father's face at her sudden appearance, followed by a clenched jaw anger. Cradled in his sister's arms, the boy stared at his father with a grave, unreadable expression. The patriarch tossed the snake essence to the butler, who caught it easily. Holding the sphere of energy, the butler marveled at the power it radiated. The clan head announced that as his eldest son was in the midst of evolving, this would serve him well. Kneeling, the butler thanked him for such generosity and swore eternal loyalty to the family. Days later, the luxurious Liu clan mansion lay beneath a star-strewn sky. Inside, the boy examined a pendant in his hands, aware that he had obtained an A-rank superior defensive treasure, a heart protection amulet, while his sister informed him that Shuang had been appointed as his maid. As if on cue, the two sisters appeared in matching maid uniforms, smiling warmly at him. Noticing his troubled expression, one of them asked what was wrong. Without answering, the boy's eyes flashed as he directed a surge of lightning into the pendant. A massive burst of yellow energy shot out through his bedroom window, leaving the sisters staring in shock at the display of power. Despite the electrical discharge, the pendant remained completely unscathed. The boy realized his experiment confirmed that beasts evolved after devouring enough divine awakeners, undergoing a form of super-evolution, knowledge never disclosed at the Divine Academy. He now understood the full scope of the nobles' monopoly on hidden information. By sacrificing the lives of civilian divine awakeners, they secured premium materials unavailable on the open market, granting themselves vastly superior strength and equipment while treading on the commoners they claimed to protect. Yet at the Academy, they preached that nobles risked their lives to defend the weak. Remembering this hypocrisy filled the boy with fury, and he clenched his fists. The sisters asked if knowledge was truly that powerful. Turning to them, he replied that he was only now beginning to grasp how dangerous ignorance could be. He then told them that from this moment on, they would use the Liu family to gather information for themselves. Meeting his determined gaze, the two girls agreed without hesitation to follow their younger brother's plan. Our boy asks Shuang why she had been with that divine team. She hesitates to answer, and Yi chimes in that she also wants to know why her own power is so strong. Shuang is left speechless as Yi stares at her intently. Then our boy asks about the other sister named San, and Shuang tenses up. Upon hearing the girl's name, the young woman is completely shaken. With tears in her eyes, she tries to explain what happened to San, but then collapses to the floor and begins to cry uncontrollably. At that moment, our boy covers her mouth and warns her not to cry loudly here. After calming down, she sits on the bed, still trembling from the memory. She starts to explain that on that day Yi had gone out to look for their brother and never came back. In a flashback, a hungry little Shuang is seen staring at a piece of cake. Her small hand reaches out to grab the cherry on top, her expression sad as she waits for her siblings to return. Deciding she cannot wait any longer, she sets out to find her brother, and Yi so they can come home sooner. Shuang begins searching through the dark house, calling out San's name. Frightened, she runs down the dim hallway and pleads for her sister to stop playing around because she is scared. Back in the present, the boy is shocked to learn that San had run away from home. Shuang explains that when she couldn't find her anywhere, she ran up to the rooftop to search. But instead of her sister, she witnessed something far more terrifying. She saw that the demon beast tide had been caused by a person. Yi is stunned by this revelation, since she had always believed the demon beast tide to be an uncontrollable natural disaster. In Shuang's memories, she is desperately scanning the city rooftops for San. She tries to open a door, begging for the little one to come out quickly. Then she turns and sees something with pure fear and dread. On the rooftop stands a mysterious man holding a crimson and golden staff under the full moon. His face is hidden in shadow, but his eyes glow with an intense red light. He raises the staff, which begins to shine with a powerful energy, and slams it down on the ground. A massive wave of power bursts outward as an enormous red magic circle forms beneath his feet, lighting up the night. The circle shoots a beam of red light skyward, tearing a hole in the heavens and creating a crimson portal. A giant reptilian eye appears within the portal, and Shuang is utterly terrified. Moments later, the red rift solidifies in the sky, and from it surge countless red demonic beasts. They pour out ready to wreak havoc on the city. With tears streaming down her face, Shuang recalls being completely alone and surrounded by these monstrous creatures shaped like fearsome dragons. From the portal above, more and more pour down, attacking everything in sight. She explains that as she fled, a wolf demon beast chased her. Suddenly, a glowing panel appeared before her. The system notified her that she had awakened a skill named Awakened Body Cultivation Divine Power, along with Elementary Strength Enhancement and Speed Enhancement. The system voice instructed her to jump to the opposite side quickly, and she obeyed, making an incredible leap between two buildings to escape. Back in the present, she tells them how she ran desperately, and later encountered the captain of the Beast Tide subjugation team, who took her in. Our boy is stunned that yet another system had appeared for no apparent reason, and by all the miracles surrounding them. He tells them that if they all have systems now and survive their own crises, then, although there is no proof, he strongly believes San might have experienced something similar and could still be alive. The girls are shocked but cling to this hope. He then says that now that they are reunited, They will use the Liu family's information network and work together to find clues about her. All the siblings agree. Suddenly, Shuang Shuang announces that she has received a task from the system with a reward. Without warning, she scoops her brother up in her arms, leaving him completely stunned. He is terrified, wondering if the previous incident is about to happen to him again. The two sisters then run off excitedly as the system mission is revealed, to give their brother a bath once more. The two sisters dashed excitedly through the mansion carrying our boy, who was shouting at the top of his lungs about their strange system, and wondering why it always seemed to favor them. In no time, they reached a vast, luxurious bath chamber to start the mission the system had assigned. Shuang Shuang hoisted the little boy up, teasing about how cute he looked. But then her eyes drifted down and she froze for a second, realizing what a boy's private part actually looked like. The other sister peered too, giggled, and called it adorable. Shuang Shuang kept up her teasing and even pretended she would flick it. Though she didn't actually hit him, the boy still felt humiliated and yelped in shock, his face burning. Inside the tub, one sister scrubbed his hair while the other, still grinning, tended to the rest. They splashed and laughed, delighted to finally give their young master a proper wash, while he sulked and complained that they'd completely changed. All at once, Shuang Shuang froze, a nervous look spreading across her face. Seeing it, our boy asked what she'd noticed. She pointed ahead with a trembling finger, whispering that the very person who had triggered the beast tide was approaching. Both he and Yi stared at her, stunned by what she had just said. Elsewhere in the estate, the butler walked beside a scar-faced man whose cold eyes carried a heavy pressure. In Shuang Shuang's memory, she saw that same man on a rooftop, his crimson gold staff striking stone, a vast red magic circle tearing open the sky, and a reptilian eye staring down from the breach. That man, she realized, had brought the monsters. Back in the hall, the boy tried to act calm, remarking that the scarred man was the butler's son and they shouldn't panic. They kept moving, but his own expression hardened with suspicion. Shuang Shuang's fear was so obvious the stranger glanced at her, though he said nothing. The girls greeted the butler with stiff smiles. He bowed deeply to the child, addressing him as young master. The boy watched the two men disappear down the hall, his eyes narrowing. At last, they reached a tall door. The steward announced that Zhao had returned to see the patriarch. Recognizing the meeting room, the boy decided they should listen in. Yi whispered that they might be caught, but he told her not to worry. Before either sister could stop him, he strode straight inside, them running behind and calling out for him to stop. Inside, his grandfather looked up from his desk, flanked by the two men, all three taken aback. The sisters bowed and apologized for failing to hold him back. But the boy ignored them, running forward with arms outstretched and calling for his grandfather in a childish voice. The patriarch dismissed the others with a smile and lifted the boy onto his lap. He spoke about the imperial capital, full of hidden power struggles, and how the Liu clan's chance to rise was approaching. For that, he said, they needed more high-quality essence and materials to build alliances. He asked the steward about preparations for the next directed beast tide. The butler and his son listened closely. The scarred man replied that new groups of demon beasts had already been located in another dimension, and could be unleashed at any time. He added that the last tide had reduced the city's divine awakener numbers by about 30%, and with only 3 months gone, the new graduates from the Divine Academy weren't yet ready to replenish them. The boy clenched his fists, fury rising as he realized the academy and nobles were in it together, feeding students false stories and sending them to die without remorse. A memory flickered of his teacher saying the tides were natural disasters that arose after the apocalypse, and the Divine Awakeners were humanity's chosen protectors who must train diligently to defend the weak. It had all been a lie. The butler reported that everything was already arranged. He had even reached out to the Task Guild to post a series of lucrative missions designed to draw in numerous outsider Divine Awakened teams. The patriarch gave a pleased nod and praised the butler, remarking that his household had been loyal to the Liu clan for 3 generations, and that such devotion was gratifying. In response, the butler made a subtle sign to his son. Understanding immediately, the younger man dropped to one knee and declared that serving the Liu family was an honor for someone like him. The butler went on to thank the master for the gift that had allowed his son to reach the peak of B-rank Divine Awakening, expressing heartfelt gratitude for the patriarch's generosity. Smiling, the patriarch instructed them to proceed with the beast tide exactly as they had planned. The kneeling man bowed his head and accepted the command without hesitation. The patriarch then added further orders. He told the butler to have the family's new leading trade guild absorb the incoming batches of materials and arrange for the equipment workshop to launch new gear at premium prices. At the same time, the dining halls, saunas, attendants, and other support services, even the casino, were all to be prepared so that the Divine Awakened who survived the tide would be tempted to spend as much of their hard-won earnings as possible within Liu family establishments. The butler accepted each instruction with a deep bow, showing no sign of reluctance. Night fell over the sprawling Liu mansion, its towers gleaming under a pale moon. Inside, our boy quietly explained everything he had learned to his sisters. He told them that the beast tides were not natural disasters but orchestrated events, engineered by powerful noble clans. Using hidden technology to open rifts to other worlds, they released hordes of monsters to slaughter civilians, then sent Divine Awakened to clean up the aftermath and gather huge amounts of resources. Those resources were funneled through markets and businesses back into the nobles' hands, eventually becoming tribute to the top houses in the imperial capital. One sister was horrified, asking how people could be so ruthless and whether the victims were not considered human at all. The boy answered that to the nobles, only their own class counted as human. Everyone else was treated as livestock. Shuang suggested they reveal the truth, but the boy cut her off, warning that nobody would believe them even if they spoke out. This left both sisters anxious, and they asked what could be done. He explained that their first step would be to dismantle the noble families, plans one piece at a time. Their immediate goal was to take down Zyro and halt the upcoming beast tide. Calling them closer, he began outlining his plan in a low voice. The two leaned in, listening intently, and when he asked if they had memorized everything, they nodded, though still visibly worried about facing such a powerful enemy. He told them they had 3 weeks to prepare because the operation would begin at the end of the month. Raising his baby bottle, he added that they would need to strengthen themselves. His sister stared, not understanding how. At that moment, the boy and his white-haired sister Yi exchanged a meaningful glance. Without a word, he pushed the bottle toward the other sister's mouth. She blinked in surprise, swallowed, and immediately felt her power surge despite having done no training. The boy then dashed off, saying he was going to get something to eat while they finished the milk he had given them, mentioning he could obtain more if needed. Meanwhile, their mother sat in meditation until she was suddenly interrupted by her son. Startled, she scolded him for his ever-growing appetite, calling him a little brat who was never satisfied. 3 weeks later, the boy stared at his system screen, wondering if he had hit a ceiling. The display showed a new skill called hyper-regeneration, which consumed 50% of his essence within range and could instantly restore him inside any designated host. Although his Divine Awakening rank had stalled at peak C rank with no breakthrough, he had gained a new ability that would let him resurrect inside a target without spending months in a womb, returning straight to his current form. He even realized it might be used offensively to destroy an enemy from within. Just as the thought crossed his mind, his sisters burst through the door, faces bright with excitement, announcing that everything was finally ready. The 3 siblings huddled together in the room, mapping out their next steps to bring Zhao down. Yi lowered her voice as she shared what she had dug up. She'd heard from one of the maids that Zhao was a system-type Divine Awakener, one of the best graduates of his class at the Divine Awakening Academy, and already at early B rank when he left school. Now he served as captain of the local security force with a future that seemed boundless. The girl also overheard other maids keeping their heads down whenever his name came up, knowing the patriarch favored Zhao and the butler heavily. The last time Zhao showed interest in a woman, the patriarch had simply gifted her to him, and afterwards she disappeared without a trace. Back in their meeting, Shuang spoke up with her own intelligence. According to what she'd found, the patriarch had supplied Zhao with high-grade life essence, pushing him to peak B rank, the ceiling for any commoner Divine Awakener. He also wielded a formidable skill known as the Divine Whip. Almost no one at his level could compete with him. The technique allowed him to turn his arms into whip-like strikes, and combined with his system-type enhancements, those blows could shatter heavy metal armor. Hearing this, Yi realized Zhao was far stronger than the last foe they had fought together. Our boy then measured himself against that strength. He had only just broken into early C rank at best. Shuang had reached peak D rank in 3 weeks of milk feeding from their mother, but even together they couldn't hope to win a head-on fight. Shuang's eyes lit up, though. She told them not to worry because she had awakened a new skill after bathing him. Yi, suddenly excited, asked what kind of ability it was. With a self-satisfied grin, Shuang declared that it had a cool, epic name. Striking a dramatic pose, she announced it as Hot-Blooded Overdrive. Yi was impressed, while their brother looked slightly embarrassed. Shuang boasted that the technique made her 5 times stronger for 30 seconds, and paired with her old mighty arm skill, one punch could send an opponent flying clear across the world. Fired up, she threw a few shadow punches as Yi clapped. Their brother allowed himself a small smirk. A plan was already forming in his mind, even as he marveled at how broken the system seemed. Not only through harsh training, but also by absorbing beast skill essences, his sisters had gained incredible powers. Even nobility didn't know of such a method. He wondered why the system granted them such gifts simply from bathing him. Still, doubt crept in. Would this power be enough to topple Zhao? Sensing his unease, Shuang asked what intelligence he had managed to collect for their scheme. He smiled broadly and said his information was vital. He had learned that Zhao would be moving through the southern part of the city at 1 in the morning. We see in flashback how the boy overheard Zhao telling his grandfather that everything was set for his 1 a.m. strike. On hearing this, Shuang went pale. That was exactly where her red pomegranate Divine Awakening group's base stood. She panicked, shouting that with the commander already dead from the last portal incident, she needed to warn the vice commander and the others. But before she could run off, her brother grabbed her arm, a flicker of lightning racing through his hand to stop her in time. He told her not to rush. They still had a window to act and save everyone. With determination, he said he had a plan to bring Zhao down. Both sisters leaned forward, eyes shining, asking if he really had a strategy already. Their brother drew them in and whispered the details, assuring them they had enough time. If they split up and made preparations, tonight Zhao would fall. The sisters nodded solemnly, fully committed. Night descended over the city as the full moon cast its glow on the coming operation. The clock ticked past midnight. The ambush hour was near. In the next scene, the siblings stood ready, dressed head to toe in black gear and masks, preparing to set their plan in motion. Under the silver glow of the full moon, the trio launched themselves off a rooftop, beginning their nocturnal infiltration. They cut through the night air like shadows, their movements silent and precise. As they descended toward a nearby structure, one of them reported that she'd picked up a signal. Their target was inside. Our boy thanked Shuang and the red pomegranate group for saving them time by tracking Zhao down first. Below, a faint glow leaked from one of the building's windows, marking the enemy's position. The three of them clung to the side of the structure, slipping forward as quietly as ghosts. They crouched behind a crumbling wall, peering across the distance at their foe. On the rooftop, Zhao stood holding a staff pulsing with crimson energy. Both sisters tensed, whispering if they should strike immediately, but their brother raised a hand, telling them to stay calm and wait. They were part of a suppression team. Timing meant everything. Meanwhile, Zhao focused, gathering a massive surge of power into his staff. Sparks of red lightning flickered and cracked from the weapon as he prepared to release its force. Seeing the perfect opening, our boy shouted the signal to attack. Shuang slammed her fist into the ground, tearing a chunk of concrete loose and hurling it with all her strength at the man. Zhao reacted quickly and dodged, though the slab still grazed his face, leaving a line of blood. The impact shook the rooftop and stunned him for an instant. Furious, Zhao barked out a challenge, demanding to know who dared assault him. His eyes darted to the gaping hole the projectile had blown in the wall behind him. Yi seized the moment, darting forward to snatch the staff from his grasp. Realizing too late, Zhao spun around, rage twisting his features as he lashed out with his divine whip ability. His arm elongated into a whip-like strike that shot toward Yi, catching her by the leg. But before he could drag her back, she hurled the staff away with all her might. Zhao's eyes widened as he saw his weapon sailing through the air. He flicked his transformed arm toward it again, trying to reel it back, but a yellow bolt of lightning cut across the night, slamming into him with devastating force. For a heartbeat, he froze, recognizing he couldn't evade in time. The blast erupted, scattering energy across the rooftop. From their vantage, our boy told his sisters they'd landed a clean hit. But then the smoke parted and Zhao stepped out, arms scorched black but eyes blazing with fury. He demanded to know who they were and why they'd provoked him with such a pathetic display. The siblings stared, stunned that he had survived. Zhao snarled that he'd make them regret the day they were born, spitting questions about which faction they belonged to. Without hesitation, he lunged toward them, ready to strike. Our boy skidded back and barked for his sisters to switch to Plan B, clutching Zhao's staff, spun it with all her strength, preparing for the next move. In a smooth motion, she flung the weapon toward her brother. He caught it mid-run as Shuang squared off with Zhao, their auras colliding like clashing storms, while he sprinted to set the next stage of their plan in motion. Shuang instantly unleashed her hot-blooded overdrive, wrapping herself in a fierce aura as she powered up. A streak of yellow light shot toward her, which she caught and hurled aside without hesitation. Zhao then lunged forward and struck her, but she absorbed the blow with ease. Her strength was now 5 times greater than before. Sha could hardly believe what he was seeing, wondering how someone so young possessed such overwhelming power and who exactly this trio really was. His thoughts were cut short when something caught his eye, leaving him stunned. The view widened to reveal the boy activating the crimson staff. Scarlet bolts of lightning burst from it in every direction as a surge of energy built up. With a swift movement, he fully awakened the staff and began opening a portal. A glowing magic circle appeared at his feet. Zhao frowned, confused about the entire spectacle. If the trio's true goal was to open the portal themselves, what was the meaning of all this chaos? As the portal finally stabilized, countless beasts could be seen lurking beyond it, clawing to cross over into this world. The boy shouted at his sisters to retreat. Responding instantly, Shuang dashed toward her brother, tossing a baby bottle at Zhao mid-stride. Startled, Zhao blocked on instinct, only to realize the container held nothing but harmless liquid. Yet what happened next truly shocked him. a crimson demon beast came charging straight at him. Despite the threat, Zhao mocked the trio for helping him complete his mission so easily. At that moment, a bolt of yellow lightning dropped from the sky, striking where he stood. He narrowly rolled clear of the blast, but a red wolf demon sank its fangs into his arm. Even so, Zhao's raw power prevailed. He cleaved the monster's head off with a single swing. Recognizing the danger of lingering, Zhao decided to withdraw now that his task was finished. But before he could escape, the sky darkened with volleys of blue arrows raining down toward him. Realization dawned, this was an ambush. On one side, arrows closed in, on the other, red demon wolves advanced. He was boxed in, yet his defiance remained unbroken. He snarled at the trio that this meager trap could never hold him. Weaving through the monsters, he evaded arrow after arrow until he reached the boy still gripping the staff. Both sisters gasped as Zhao closed the distance, wolves at his heels, intent on tearing into the child. At the last moment, Zhao veered aside, letting the wolves' charge continue. He smirked, taunting the boy that such a clumsy trick would never catch him. The wolves surged closer and closer to the child while the sisters shouted for him to run, but he cried back that they must stay away. Hearing the siblings' voices sent a jolt through Zhao's mind. He knew that sound from somewhere. As he turned, a far worse sight greeted him. The wolves were not aiming for the boy at all. They had leapt past him and were still after Zhao. He had no time to ponder why. Realizing escape was impossible, Zhao whipped out his divine technique, lashing away and knocking aside arrow after arrow. Only the red beasts remained. He fought with relentless precision, cutting down demon wolves as they lunged, but their sheer numbers overwhelmed him. One by one, they clamped onto his limbs, dragging him down. Agony coursed through him as claws and fangs sank deep, his body torn from every side. It looked as if Zhao, the one who had summoned these interdimensional creatures, was finally about to become their prey. The small baby pulled his scepter out of the ground, and as the last sparks faded, the red lightning scattered from the sky. Below, nothing remained of Zio except the scattered fragments left behind for the wolves to tear apart. Shuang and Yi immediately ran toward him in panic, calling out to their exhausted little brother. Before they could reach him, the pack of red wolves shifted its attention toward the child. Both girls instinctively put themselves in front of him, standing as his shield. Shuang shouted sharply that he should leave the rest to them, and Yi, though quieter, stepped forward with firm determination. Shuang raised her voice again with relief as she spotted the vice-captain arriving. From the sky, a woman with long purple hair descended with her squad, ready for combat. Seeing this, the little boy let out a tired breath, saying with quiet satisfaction that the mission was complete and they could finally go home. The following morning, in a luxurious mansion, chaos erupted. A furious scream echoed through the hall as the patriarch stood trembling with rage while the butler knelt before him, begging for forgiveness. The man cried, insisting they had failed in their duties. The patriarch slammed his cane on the floor, shouting that Zio had ruined everything at such a crucial time. The butler tried to calm him, assuring him that he would investigate the entire incident and present a clear explanation soon. The patriarch's hand trembled as he tried to calm down, though his anger still boiled beneath the surface. He muttered darkly that the Lu family would surely avenge his son, and that he would never forgive the traitor responsible. The butler thanked him with deep gratitude and promised to uncover whoever was behind the attack. At that moment, the door opened and the boy's mother stepped in, calling for the butler. She complained that the baby was hungrier than usual and that she had hoped to go shopping today. The patriarch laughed loudly, saying it was normal for the child to eat more. After all, he was growing quickly. He added proudly that the boy was the hope of both families' future. Then, almost casually, the patriarch mentioned that several prestigious families had already approached him to arrange a marriage for the child. The mother froze in shock, wondering how her son had already become popular among the noble houses. The patriarch explained confidently that the little one's reputation had spread far and wide, so he needed to deal with this marriage matter as soon as possible. Hearing this, the baby stared in disbelief, unable to understand how he had suddenly become part of some strange engagement scheme. Nearby, Shuang and Yi overheard everything and froze in surprise when they heard talk of their brother being engaged. When the baby closed his eyes and nodded, confirming the news was true, both sisters were clearly unhappy. Yi asked anxiously if he was planning to marry the descendants of those awful people. But the boy smiled gently and reassured them that he would never abandon them, saying he had no interest in spoiled brats from noble families anyway. The girl's expression softened at once, relieved and quietly overjoyed by his promise. Outside the mansion, carriages began to arrive one after another as noble families brought gifts for the engagement ceremony. The butler hurried about directing preparations, shouting orders to ensure everything appeared perfect. The boy's mother groaned to the patriarch, saying the butler could have handled everything without dragging her into this mess. The patriarch only clicked his tongue and replied that his own useless son couldn't manage household affairs at all, so she needed to learn what it meant to be a proper matriarch. At that moment, a maid rushed down the corridor and approached the butler with urgent whispers. The butler hurried to the patriarch's side and leaned down to speak softly into his ear. The patriarch's expression shifted at once, his anger slowly replaced by a deep, calculating seriousness. He then stood up and invited his daughter-in-law to join him for the engagement meeting. She stepped inside the hall carefully, carrying the little boy in her arms. The butler hurried into the hall and announced that a sealed letter from the second young master had arrived directly from the imperial capital. The old master accepted it with a dark expression, then handed it to his daughter-in-law, who held the baby securely in her lap. The little boy stared at the elegant wax seal with wide eyes, recognizing, even as a toddler, the type used for highly confidential noble communications. But whatever political schemes lay within the letter meant nothing to him. He was far more interested in leaning toward his mother for another sip of milk, whining softly and reaching out as if nothing else mattered. She clicked her tongue and told him to drink slowly, holding him close while trying to keep his restless hands under control. The elder ignored the scene entirely and asked her for her opinion on the content. She frowned as she read, wondering why the higher council suddenly cared about the Ling family when everyone knew they were weak and fatting. The old master only gave a cold smile, saying the Ling family had made a foolish mistake, and now their businesses were ripe for the taking. He ordered decisively that the Ling family's marriage proposal party must not return. Meanwhile, the baby, oblivious to the political execution happening over his head, passed his bottle to Shuang as if that were the most important matter in the world. Before Shuang could reposition herself, Yi burst into the room at full speed, startling her so badly that the bottle flew from her hands and splashed milk all over Shuang's bright red hair. The little boy quickly snatched the dripping bottle and shoved it straight into Yi's mouth as if this would calm her down. Yi gulped twice in confusion before pulling it away and blurting, breathless, that she had just seen Sanson. The boy stiffened instantly when he heard that name and demanded to know where she was. Yi explained that Sanson had been spotted inside the Ling family's marriage proposal party. Her memory flashed back to the event she served at, noticing the Ling family's carriage rolling into the courtyard, servants lining up to greet them, and young Sanson sitting inside the carriage in a maid's uniform, quietly following her assignment. Hearing this, the boy's face tightened. His sisters noticed it immediately and asked with concern what was wrong, but he only muttered furiously that the Lu family intended to crush the Ling family soon, and that Sanson being there was nothing short of a disaster. He demanded they find a way to get her out of that place immediately. He tried to dash off, but his mother appeared right in front of him with a sharp look, blocking his escape. She lifted him effortlessly into her arms, reminding him that he wasn't allowed to run around anymore and that his grandfather wanted him brought to the meeting. Shuang and Yi watched helplessly as he was carried away, their worry deepening. When Shuang asked what they should do, Yi could only say that they needed a proper plan first, though both looked far from reassured. A maid interrupted before they could continue, asking the two girls to help the butler prepare for the engagement gathering. They followed her reluctantly. In the hall, the old master addressed the noble guests, thanking them for attending. He declared that among the potential candidates, only 3 young women met the requirements to be considered compatible with his grandson. The family representatives bowed respectfully as he continued, explaining that skill was the foundation of their lineage, and that the girl who passed a special test would become the child's future bride. The baby, sitting in his mother's lap with milk still on his lips, stared blankly at the crowd, completely baffled over why his life suddenly involved tests and marriage, wondering silently what absurd ordeal he was being dragged into this time. The 3 families chosen for the test were finally announced: Yi, Nangong, and the Ling family. The patriarch's expression darkened the moment the Ling family's name was spoken. He muttered irritably that they had even dared to send a concubine's daughter, something he had allowed only to distract them with false hope. Meanwhile, the child in his mother's arms grew tense, thinking in frustration that in this entire mess, the only people he could rely on were Shuang and Yi. Overwhelmed, he buried his face into his mother's clothes as if this alone could calm him, which only succeeded in irritating her further. She tried to pull him back, complaining loudly about his habit of hiding and sucking for comfort, while he simply told himself he needed a moment to drink and settle his nerves. The patriarch found amusement in her exasperation and told her to let the boy drink as much as he pleased. He added with satisfaction that the child's unusual development would one day be evaluated in the capital, and when that happened, all the credit would go to her. Too exhausted to appreciate the compliment, she muttered that he was nothing but a bottomless troublemaker who knew only how to consume endlessly. Somewhere else in the mansion, the butler entered a quiet room where the head of the family sat alone. He leaned forward and reported calmly that the Ling girl would not survive the upcoming test, and that their entire delegation would soon be removed from the picture. The family head's eyes gleamed with cruel satisfaction as he called the plan flawless. What neither man noticed was the small child nearby, who overheard every word. Fear shot through him immediately, for the only thought in his panicked mind was Sanson and the danger she might be walking into. At the same time, Shuang sped through the mansion halls with a tray of fruit balanced carefully in her hands, while Yi hurried beside her with her own assigned tasks, complaining that she had too much to do and no opportunity to slip away. The two sisters caught each other's eyes briefly as they rushed in opposite directions, both wearing the same tense expression and silently wondering how they were supposed to rescue Sanson under these circumstances. The scene shifted to the Liu family's private arena, a massive coliseum-like structure towering with stone pillars and open sky. The patriarch, the boy's mother holding him in her lap, and the butler seated themselves in a private viewing box overseeing everything below. The butler soon rose and announced the beginning of the selection trial, calling for the young lady representing the Nang Gong family. All eyes turned toward the entrance as the first contender stepped forward, a girl dressed in dark Gothic attire, moving with a composed, graceful confidence. The patriarch nodded approvingly, remarking on her refined beauty and her reputation for combat talent. The boy's mother remained unimpressed, quietly judging the girl's appearance as lacking the qualities she considered necessary. The patriarch reminded her that not every noble daughter was born an ideal match, while she countered that the future daughter-in-law must at least be someone capable of sharing their responsibilities in the years to come. The butler then called for the second contender from the Yi family. A hand shot up immediately, accompanied by an eager voice. A blonde girl in a frilly Lolita dress skipped forward toward the arena center, her excitement practically radiating from her. She approached the first competitor with a bright, overly friendly smile and offered a polished, graceful greeting to the family representatives. Watching this, the boy's mother noted dryly that the girl certainly understood how to put on a charming act to gain favor. Finally, the butler announced the third candidate, Ling Pio of the Ling family. A quiet girl with short hair and simple clothing began walking toward the arena. She stepped into the center calmly, looking nothing like the other two, her presence subdued yet steady. With all three competitors gathered, the atmosphere became tense as the patriarch and the boy's mother observed them closely, their expressions turning serious. The child, watching from his mother's lap, wondered in confusion if this short-haired girl was the same person Sanson had been with, and how she ended up mixed into something so dangerous. Down in the arena, the three young women faced one another, preparing for the test to begin. The short-haired girl lifted her gaze slightly and let out a single quiet sound to acknowledge the others. The blonde girl reacted instantly, pointing toward her with visible irritation, questioning whether such a casual greeting was proper behavior for a noble participant at all. Dangling upside down by one foot, the little protagonist seemed genuinely overwhelmed by whatever strange mess he had stumbled into. The short-haired girl holding him, however, looked entirely unbothered, as if lifting a child like a caught rabbit were the most natural thing in the world. She smiled pleasantly, calling him her future husband and declaring that she would be in his care from now on. The boy flailed in panic, demanding that she put him down immediately before his life ended in humiliation. Before she could respond, three furious voices erupted nearby. Shuang, Yi, and Sanson came charging in, their faces burning with outrage as they pointed accusing fingers at the girl who dared to hold their little brother like a prize from a festival stall. Even in their fury, the youngest among them still managed to call out his name with bright enthusiasm, almost as if she had forgotten the situation in her excitement. Watching all this unfold while still dangling upside down, the boy wondered bleakly how things had spiraled into such chaos. Hours earlier, everything had been far more straightforward back in the Liu family arena, where the skill test was underway. The purple-haired representative from the Nang Gong family stood facing a demonic boar that charged toward her with murderous force. Her hand tightened around the hilt of her sword as the blade began to glow. In one clean, decisive movement, she stepped forward and sliced the beast neatly in half. The two halves slid apart behind her as she stood composed in the center of the arena. From the viewing platform, the patriarch remarked with calm approval that her ability was impressive for someone who had not undergone a divine awakening and was relying solely on the family sword. The boy, watching with wide eyes, could not help thinking about the strength of the girl fighting so fiercely for an arranged marriage she might not even want. Soon after, the second round began. The representative from the Yi family entered the arena. This time, the blonde girl in the frilled dress faced a boar even larger and more vicious than the first. She greeted the snarling creature with a wicked grin and eyes that sparkled unnervingly. Strange pink energy rippled from her, and the boar suddenly jolted as though its mind had been snatched from inside its skull. Confused and frantic, the beast began running erratically around the arena, unable to understand its own panic. Influenced by her power, it darted wildly until it slammed headfirst into the arena wall with tremendous force, collapsing instantly. Silence fell for a brief moment before the crowd erupted. The blonde girl waved sweetly, announcing her success as if she had merely finished a school performance. In the stands, the boy and his sister stared in complete disbelief at the bizarre display. His mother leaned toward the butler, asking what just happened. The butler explained calmly that the girl's ability was her family's divine awakening, a mental interference ability passed down through their lineage. This immediately unsettled the boy's mother, who muttered that such a talent meant the girl could one day manipulate the entire household. The patriarch dismissed her concern, saying it would not matter if the Liu family possessed a divine awakening of even higher rank to counter it. Meanwhile, the boy pondered the way his mother's milk amplified his strength and wondered what other secrets noble bloodlines concealed. It was at that moment that the Ling family's representative was finally called. The short-haired girl entered the arena with quiet confidence, drawing the attention of the purple-haired competitor, who studied her carefully. The blonde girl, on the other hand, wasted no time sneering at the newcomer, remarking that the Ling family must have truly run out of options if this was whom they had sent. Down in the arena, the short-haired Ling girl stood facing a massive demonic boar, her posture calm enough to make the boy wonder if she truly intended to just stand there until the beast trampled her. In the private viewing box, the patriarch and the butler shared a knowing look, one filled with the kind of satisfaction that came whenever a plan took root in the shadows. The patriarch, unbothered, simply remarked that if one wished to eliminate someone without raising suspicion, the trick was to make their loss appear natural. He gestured at the arena below, urging her to pay attention. The monstrous boar lunged forward at full speed, yet the Ling girl didn't flinch. She even allowed a faint, smug smile to surface, as if mockingly asking whether this was truly the best the creature could muster. At the final moment, a soft blue glow flickered across her fingertips, forming a defensive magic barrier. She raised one finger and blocked the full weight of the boar's attack with almost casual ease. Then she brought her fist forward, wrapped in a swirling blue aura, and struck the beast head-on. The impact echoed through the arena, and flames erupted violently across the creature's body. Shuang, Yi, Sanson, and the boy stared in disbelief, unable to tear their eyes away as the demonic boar writhed and roared, engulfed in fire. Even the patriarch and butler were stunned speechless as the monster's burning form began to twist and distort. The creature's flames surged brighter, until it stood transformed into a C-rank mutant boar king, a development that made the blonde competitor grin in satisfaction as she assumed her troublesome rival had just met her end. But the purple-haired Nang Gong representative didn't share her amusement. Her focused gaze suggested she understood that something far more dangerous had just awakened. Up in the stands, the boy and his sisters fell into utter panic. Knowing what would happen next, the boy made a split-second decision and activated his most embarrassing hidden technique. He latched onto his mother for milk. His mother, who had tolerated far too much already, groaned at his terrible timing. Then he abruptly spat out everything he'd just drunk, splattering her once again. Furious, she shoved him away, shouting her outrage as the milk arced through the air, and unfortunately sailed straight into the arena below. The mutant boar, whose senses had sharpened with evolution, caught the scent instantly. The glowing pink aura that surrounded the blonde girl suddenly meant nothing to it. Instead, the monster's attention locked onto the direction of the milk, its hunger intensifying. With a deafening roar, the beast began charging toward the viewing box. The mother froze, bewildered by this new nightmare unfolding before her, and instinctively prepared to throw the boy to safety while Shuang and Yi braced themselves to fight. Before they could act, however, the Ling girl stepped forward and told them to leave it to her. Strange energy coiled around her arm, and the ground beneath the charging beast erupted. Sharp wooden thorns shot upward, entwining around the monster's legs and torso with incredible speed, constricting it until the boar king staggered helplessly. In the viewing box, the patriarch and the butler exchanged stunned looks. The mother stared in disbelief, trying to understand what kind of wood-based divine awakening possessed such raw lethality. The patriarch admitted the girl's ability was impressive, though he still insisted it fell short of his grandson's potential. Down in the arena, red thorn-like vines wrapped around the Ling girl's arm as she studied them with curiosity, trying to understand the nature of her own awakening. The purple-haired Nang Gong competitor watched with unexpected respect, while the blonde girl wrinkled her nose in disgust, declaring she would never want to be wrapped in something like that. The patriarch leaned back, observing the scene carefully. He explained that this wood-type awakening could restrain even higher-rank monsters by draining their inner essence. And indeed, the Boar King's body began to shrivel as its life force was drawn out, leaving behind only a skeleton in the arena dust. The butler quietly asked what should be done with the girl now that she had proven herself. The patriarch's eyes drifted toward his grandson, still nestled in his mother's arms with his sisters clustered protectively around him. A calculating smile spread across the old man's face. Instead of eliminating the Ling family, he saw an opportunity far more profitable. He decided the Ling girl would make an excellent bride for his grandson, a perfect tool to tighten their grip on the weakened Ling clan. The moment the youngest sister screamed at Pio to put him down, the red-haired Shuang rounded on the little girl and demanded to know how she had ended up with Pio in the first place. Sanson looked as though she were on the verge of tears, completely unable to answer, and that only made Shuang lecture her harder for disappearing without a word. Yi even tapped her lightly on the head in frustration, the small thumps making Sanson shrink into herself. Their bickering was cut short when the protagonist intervened sharply, insisting that now wasn't the time for scolding, because the Ling family, Shuang's maternal side, was moments away from being annihilated. All three sisters froze. Before panic could rise again, Pio tilted her head with a calm smile and said she already knew that. Her casual tone left the siblings stunned. Pio explained that she didn't have much time and needed to tell them something far more important. The four of them instantly quieted, listening with full attention. She asked whether they had awakened their systems yet. The protagonist and his sisters stiffened, each one startled by the question, but they still nodded, confirming it. Pio then told them that they must have already begun developing strange abilities, signs of divine awakening, and she asked gently whether they believed in miracles. In perfect unison, all three siblings shook their heads, shyly and honestly. Pio hugged Sanson close, letting the little one settle in her lap, and then spoke with a heaviness that seemed to darken the air around them. She said that every miracle came attached to a terrible price. Her words left the three siblings shocked, and Sanson nestled deeper into Pio's embrace, as if bracing herself. The protagonist finally asked what she meant, and Pio revealed the truth. In the previous timeline, Sanson had lost her beloved siblings one by one until she was left completely alone. A brief flash of memory crossed Sanson's eyes, her sisters' silhouettes being torn away from her, and her small hands trembled. Pio continued, explaining that during that time of despair, Sanson's divine awakening appeared, the power to steal abilities. With it, Sanson could take divine awakenings and skills from others. In a world ruled by chaos, such a power turned her into a feared villain. But in the end, broken and alone, Sanson found a way to travel back to the past. She sacrificed all the power she had accumulated, everything she had ever stolen, just to return to this time so she could save the people she loved most. The protagonist's breath caught, and he asked quietly whether Sanson had truly been reborn. Sanson only nodded, shy and trembling. Pio laughed softly and teased that the little girl might look adorable now, but in her previous life she had been a ruthless demon everyone feared. That shocking contrast left the siblings speechless. Pio then explained that the system interface they all used was actually a mental construct created by Sanson. Each time they activated it, they drained a little of her inner power. As she spoke, a faint aura pulsed from Sanson, confirming her words. The divine awakenings they possessed were the result of Sanson's experiments and countless near-fatal breakthroughs in her past life. Still overwhelmed, the protagonist finally asked how she had obtained his divine awakening. Pio told him that Sanson had sacrificed the last of her stolen power to save him during a moment of grave danger. To do so, she had infiltrated the capital's inner circle, defeated the head of the Mew family, and endured an impossible number of hardships, all for his sake. The moment these words settled, he and his sisters couldn't remain still. They ran to Sanson and pulled her into a tight, desperate hug. Wrapped in their arms, Sanson broke into tears, tears of relief, of joy, of finally being with the siblings she had fought so hard to reclaim. Their little huddle trembled with emotion, a small, beautiful moment glowing in the middle of everything collapsing around them. We see a shabby-looking bar as a strange tune plays. Inside the joint, there's a blonde girl pole dancing. A blonde young man sauntered up to her with exaggerated confidence, trying to flirt as if he owned the place. She thanked him with a faint purr, almost inviting, before abruptly raising her leg toward his face in a sharp, graceful arc. Instead of recoiling, the fool leaned forward and sniffed her foot like it was the finest perfume he'd ever encountered, sighing in admiration. A green-haired companion emerged from the tables and demanded loudly if the blonde idiot had lost his mind. The moment he got closer, his expression shifted. He realized something was terribly wrong. The blonde guy swayed, dizzy, the world tilting as whatever strange influence she used began taking effect. Both the woman and the green-haired man exchanged a wicked smile, the kind that made it clear this was all part of their plan. Their victim begged them not to do anything to him, but it was already too late. Moments later, the scene shifted to a cold basement, where the blonde man now hung bound to a chair, ropes cutting into his wrists. The pole dancer stood before him, tormenting him with every slow, deliberate movement, as if she enjoyed watching his terror. Then she struck a dramatic pose, smiling cruelly at her captive. A mysterious butler stepped out of the shadows, face stern and eyes sharp enough to cut glass. He warned the prisoner to spill everything, every detail, without omission. The blonde man broke immediately, pleading for mercy as he explained that he had been on a mission to stop a beast wave. The butler's expression didn't soften. He simply told him to continue. The man said that after defeating the beasts, he'd received a small reward. At that, the old man snapped, shouting that he should never have laid a hand on his son. The prisoner panicked, insisting it wasn't him and stammering that the culprits had been 3 masked individuals. That caught the old man's attention. He leaned in sharply and demanded to know who they were, where they came from, and what their names were. The blonde man shook his head frantically, saying he had only caught a glimpse from far away, 2 girls and a single child. The old man froze at that description. 2 girls and a child. His eyes narrowed as if something had clicked in his mind. He demanded to know the prisoner's team and captain. When the man whispered that he belonged to the red pomegranate team, the old man's features shifted with sudden understanding, recalling the dangerous portal filled with powerful creatures they had crossed paths with before. He straightened, decision made, and ordered the woman, Pio, to handle him. The prisoner screamed in betrayal, reminding them of the promise that he would be released. Pio answered with a merciless strike from her platform shoe, smashing his face and pinning him against the floor. The old man looked back only long enough to say that he had indeed promised not to torment the prisoner, but he had made no promise about sparing him as an example. Then he turned and left the basement. An instant later, he appeared atop a tall building, the night wind tugging at his coat. He walked across the rooftop until he reached a cluster of deep cracks etched into the surface of the concrete. Crouching down, he ran his palm across the fractured ground. The moment his fingers brushed the surface, a dim, eerie glow pulsed from within the cracks, resonating with a strange energy. He moved on to inspect a second spot, his sharp eyes tracing the patterns as though reading an ancient script written in stone. After a long moment, something clicked in his mind. A flash of memory rose unbidden, him holding the protagonist's little sister while she bled in his arms. The old man straightened slowly. This, he realized, wasn't just strange, it was important. And now that he suspected the truth, he needed to confirm it immediately. A blonde woman swayed on stage, moving with an effortless sensuality that held the crowd's attention. Not far from her, down a narrow hallway, a green-haired man slipped into a private room where the old butler, our hero's grandfather's loyal aide, sat warming his hands around a cup of something hot. The young man addressed him respectfully, asking whether he had discovered anything new. The butler lifted his gaze, expression steady, waiting for an answer. The green-haired informant produced a photograph he had been hiding inside his coat, admitting that it hadn't been easy to track the target. He explained that the person in question had been nothing more than a D-rank nobody, a young man who lived with 3 sisters and died half a year earlier. When the photograph came into view, the butler's eyes narrowed. The image showed the protagonist in his past life, smiling gently with 3 girls who clearly meant the world to him. The old man murmured the timeline to himself, nodding that everything had occurred around the time the MC's parents had gone out to hunt the Liu family's beast. That thought triggered a series of images in his mind. The failed mission, the chaos, the disaster that led to the boy's tragic end. He remembered the 2 girls who had desperately tried to shield the child, the treasure the boy had managed to obtain, and the monster that had emerged from that misfortune. In the present, the green-haired informant held out a glowing blue orb as payment for the request. He thanked the butler for the generous reward he'd been given earlier. The butler accepted the orb without a word, his expression darkening with resolve. As he rose to leave, he swore silently that he would avenge his son, no matter what it cost. The scene shifted to a quiet room where a baby bottle full of milk sat on a table. One of the MC's sisters watched him closely, puzzled by how he seemed lost in thought just staring at the bottle. The little guy, however, was deep in contemplation, wondering why ordinary people hit their limits at B-rank while nobles were able to surpass it with ease. His sister knelt beside him, lowering her voice as she explained that B-rank truly was the natural human limit, and that the entire ranking system had been engineered by the noble houses themselves. It wasn't about strength, it was about control. The nobles had crafted the illusion that they were inherently superior, destined to rule over everyone else. Both siblings stiffened at the revelation, but she continued, saying she had learned all of this in her past life, back when she had become a feared villainess. She explained that the 8 great clans of the capital guarded secrets that enabled evolution far beyond S-rank, secrets they never intended to share with outsiders. The MC stared at her in disbelief and asked what existed beyond S-rank. Frustration flashed across her face as she admitted she didn't know. She only knew the nobles used awakened individuals as living generators, draining their power for the clan's own benefit. She admitted bitterly that in her previous life, she had wanted nothing more than to destroy the world. But everything changed when she discovered a way to save her brother, returning to the past with Pio at her side. The MC reached out and took her hands gently, promising he would never abandon her again. His sister's eyes shimmered as she vowed that she, too, would stand and fight with him. A fragile emotional moment blossomed between them, her tears soft and sincere as he comforted her. But that peace shattered instantly when Pio, his fiancée, kicked the door open with her usual dramatic flair. She announced that their sweet moment was over because something big had just happened. Both siblings jumped at the intrusion, startled, exchanging a look of concern as they waited for her explanation. Pio informed them that the Liu family's old butler had arrived, and not alone. He had brought someone with him. The MC and his sister felt their stomachs tighten as she revealed with a smirk that the visitor claimed to be the childhood friend of Lady Liu. The MC blinked in confusion, unsure how that translated into a crisis. Pio rolled her eyes and leaned in, saying that for the Liu family's butler to personally escort a supposed friend of his mother, something about that situation smelled very, very wrong. Somewhere else in the mansion, Pio found herself standing stiffly in a practice room while a maid lectured her about etiquette. The stern woman informed her that they would begin her lessons with posture, even though Pio's expression made it clear she was already bored out of her mind. When the maid snapped at her for keeping her hands in her pockets, apparently a grave offense in the Liu household, Pio glanced sideways in irritation and muttered that she understood, wondering who this woman thought she was to touch her so casually. The maid puffed up with authority, proudly declaring that she was a close friend of Lady Liu's, as if that title alone gave her dominion over everyone else. In the background, guards dragged a silver-haired man across the floor, his voice rising in furious protest. His face twisted with rage as he fought against their grip, but the guards hauled him away without mercy. The maid ignored the commotion entirely, announcing that distractions like this were commonplace and that nothing mattered more than the engagement preparations. Pio gave a tired sigh, repeating that she got the point. But her eyes sharpened a second later as she flicked a small red seed from between her fingers. The object shot across the room with pinpoint precision and latched onto the struggling man's collar. A tiny white flower blossomed instantly from the seed, a listening vine. A matching bloom appeared subtly on Pio's ear, letting her hear the man's furious curses as he demanded to know why the butler had detained him and who had ordered it. When she had heard enough, she brushed off the flower and returned to the siblings' room. The moment she stepped inside, the MC brightened and asked, with an impressed grin, whether the phantom blood vine could really be used for spying. The confidence in her smirk confirmed it. She added casually that she and Sanson had once been a notorious assassin duo, their methods diverse and efficient. His other sister cut right to the point, asking what information Pio had gathered. But her question twisted unexpectedly, wondering aloud whether the imprisoned man might actually be their mother's lover, and whether their mother had been involved with many men. The MC froze, stunned by how blunt she was, then admitted awkwardly that it was entirely possible. A vivid memory surfaced of watching, even as an unborn child, the times when his mother would sneak away to meet a certain man. His mind replayed the scene of his mother walking down a street with him in her arms, her gaze darting around suspiciously before a well-dressed man pulled her into a fitting room. The man wrapped his arms around her confidently, and she complained that caring for the baby was exhausting, nodding that he ate far too much. Moments later, the atmosphere between the two adults shifted into something intimate. Held in her arms, the infant version of himself could only stare blankly, sweat beading on his tiny face, as the situation grew more awkward by the second. Back in the present, Pio shrugged and commented that it wasn't unusual, even his father had lovers. The MC frowned deeply, thinking aloud that if this sort of affair was normal, then why had the butler locked the man up? That question seemed to trouble his sister as well. She exchanged a look with Pio, seeking a clearer explanation. His sister speculated hesitantly that perhaps the Liu family suspected he might not be their biological son. Pio nodded immediately, saying that such a possibility felt very likely. There would be no other reason to drag the man in secretly. Hearing this, the MC crossed his arms, openly irritated, but the frustration didn't last. A confident smirk replaced it as he assured his sister that she didn't need to worry because he had her reincarnation ability on his side. His sister blinked in surprise at his sudden bravado, a faint blush coloring her cheeks before she nodded with a soft smile, agreeing that he might actually be right. But just as the mood settled into something warm and hopeful, the door slammed open with enough force to rattle the walls. A piercing scream exploded into the room, freezing all three of them as they turned toward the doorway in shock. The door swung open so violently that it slammed against the wall, and Yi hurried inside, breathlessly announcing that Master Liu had summoned the little master. Pio's smirk curved immediately, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment, and she remarked that the people responsible for the disturbance had finally shown up to settle things. Yi, still confused, looked between her and the panting girl, demanding to know who exactly had arrived and what Pio meant. Pio leaned closer to her, whispering something too quietly for anyone else to hear, and whatever those words were, they drained the color straight from Yi's face. She stared at Pio with wide, frightened eyes and asked in a trembling voice if someone intended to harm her brother. The little MC answered before Pio could, explaining matter-of-factly that the man in question had been spreading rumors about an affair with their mother. Pio added that the Liu family had treated the butler's brother almost like an adopted son, and nothing enraged noble houses more than a stain on their reputation. Even so, Yi remained anxious, muttering that noble families were unpredictable and treacherous by nature. Pio placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, telling her not to worry because none of them would let anything happen to the little master. Their brother, however, insisted they all calm down. Avoiding the summons would only worsen the situation. He asked Yi to take him there, saying they would simply improvise once inside. Still tense, she picked him up and carried him through the corridors. When they reached the study, she announced their arrival. The patriarch sat deeply in his armchair and with a single wave of his hand dismissed the maid, leaving only the three of them. He then gestured for his grandson, taking the child onto his lap with a surprisingly gentle motion. The little one glanced back at his sister, giving a tiny shake of his head, a silent reassurance that made Yi bow respectfully, even though worry still clouded her expression. She stepped back and exited, letting the door close behind her. Moments later, the MC's father stormed in, demanding to know why he had been summoned so abruptly. The old man rose immediately, jabbing a finger at him while complaining that his son spent every waking moment playing around instead of managing his own household. The father tried to defend himself, insisting that he was simply networking like the patriarch always insisted, but the older man only snorted in disdain. Meanwhile, in another part of the mansion, the man rumored to be the mother's lover was receiving a brutal beating in a dimly lit room, his screams muffled by the thick concrete walls. Eventually, the patriarch led his son and the child down into the basement, where the butler stood waiting with grim patience. The sight of the bloodied, bound prisoner made the father's lip curl in disgust. The patriarch handed the little master to the butler first, and the servant accepted the baby with a smile that felt just a little too smooth. In his arms, the toddler fixed him with a suspicious look, sensing something off even without fully understanding the danger, while the old man behind them revealed a sinister grin. When the patriarch asked if the prisoner had confessed anything, the butler shook his head. The MC's father leaned closer to the bound man, asking with contempt what exactly he had been bragging about. The patriarch answered for him, stating plainly that the man had been boasting about an affair with his son's wife, right under the Liu family's nose. The father erupted instantly, shouting that he would deal with that woman because his reputation was at stake. The patriarch cut him off sharply, reminding him that the arranged marriage they had fought so hard to secure could not be jeopardized by stupidity. Even so, the father attempted to lunge at the prisoner, but the old man stepped in to restrain him before he made a mess of things. With cold finality, the patriarch ordered a DNA test between the prisoner and his grandson. The butler lifted the little master once more, and the boy smiled faintly, knowing this was unfolding exactly as he had hoped. The servant set him gently on the table and told him not to be frightened. It would be quick. He pricked the child's finger with a small device and collected the blood sample before turning back to the prisoner. His expression darkened. He informed the captive that now that they knew he wasn't related to the young master, he could act without restraint. Then, with a voice that shook the air, he revealed that the death of his own son would be paid for with the lives of the prisoner's siblings. The child froze. For the first time, he saw the butler's face twist with pure, murderous intent, eyes glowing a deep, violent red. And in that moment, the little master finally understood the truth. It had been the butler all along. The moment the truth settled in his mind, the little hero felt his stomach twist. Panic washed over him, cold and sharp, and sweat gathered at the back of his neck. The butler, however, looked perfectly composed, almost serene, as he turned back toward the machine, his eyes gleaming with a calculated confidence that made the boy's skin crawl. The child couldn't understand why the man looked so assured when, as far as he knew, the test shouldn't work at all. Before he could puzzle it out, the device on the table began beeping, its lights flashing. The patriarch leaned forward with a thin smile and announced that the results had finally arrived. The father hovered anxiously nearby, demanding to know the answer while the butler pulled the printed slip of paper free. The head of the Liu family watched with a grave, unreadable expression, and on his lap the boy tensed, heart-hammering. Then the butler lifted his head with a polished grin and congratulated the patriarch, declaring the test negative. Across the room, the bruised prisoner cried out, insisting he was innocent and screaming for mercy, but the father only scoffed, already bored with the man's pleas. The butler asked calmly how the family wished to handle the situation so their reputation remained untouched. The patriarch's cold stare drifted to the prisoner. Yet before he could speak, the father jabbed a finger toward his own son and demanded the child be tested as well, just to make sure. The request made the little hero's breath hitch. Panic surged again, now far worse. He watched helplessly as the butler approached the father first, taking a sample of his blood. Then the man turned toward him with the vial in hand. Desperate to buy time, the boy suddenly burst into tears and flailed as though terrified of the needle. The butler flinched, sweat slipping down his temple, clearly thrown off by the child's unexpected outburst. The patriarch frowned and gently held his grandson's hand, telling him to stay still and let the procedure continue. On the old man's lap, the child clenched his tiny fist tightly, wondering how he was going to get out of this alive. Somewhere deep in his mind, he could almost hear Pyro's cool voice urging him to stay calm and not expose himself. Taking a shaky breath, he opened his hand. The butler leaned close and drew the sample. Soon after, both vials were placed into the machine, and once again the room filled with the rhythmic hum of analysis. The moment the machine printed the result, the father demanded to know the outcome. The butler picked up the slip and froze. His eyes trembled. His lips parted soundlessly. He stared at the paper as though it had personally betrayed him. For a moment he looked genuinely shaken, but the little hero wasn't fooled. Behind his innocent expression, he silently called the man a fox. The slip passed to the father's hands. The man scanned it, and his eyes flashed green with rage. The paper crumpled in his fist as fury overtook him. He roared that he would rid himself of both the boy and the woman and lunged forward with murderous intent. The patriarch intercepted him with a single thunderous shout that stopped the man mid-step. Then, without hesitation, he delivered a slap so fierce it echoed off the stone walls. The father staggered, staring at the old man in disbelief, still clutching the paper. Nearby, even the butler watched in stunned silence. The patriarch's eyes darkened. He called his son a fool, one who apparently believed his many affairs were secrets. The father muttered that it had been networking, a word so pathetic the narrator himself almost choked. But the patriarch wasn't amused. He declared that nothing shameful should ever be done under the Liu family name, and certainly not hidden behind flimsy excuses. The father, face burning, asked if they were simply supposed to ignore what they now knew and continue wasting resources on the boy. The patriarch looked down at his grandson, the child sitting quietly in his arms, and answered with chilling composure. The boy had consumed enough resources. It was time, he said, for an evolution mission. The father blinked, confused, asking what the old man meant. The patriarch stated plainly that if the boy survived, he could become a tremendous asset to the family. And if not, it was time for him and his wife to try for another child anyway. Rage twisted the father's face as he shouted that he was done tolerating that woman and intended to take her down himself. Before he could spew another word, the patriarch's hand cracked across his cheek again, the sound echoing through the basement. Stunned, the man stared at his father and demanded to know why he had been slapped a second time. The old man, still holding his grandson with one arm, looked at him with icy contempt and called him a fool. He reminded him of their political alliances and said that his daughter-in-law's duty was to produce several heirs to secure the Liu bloodline. The terrified man nodded quickly, shrinking under the weight of responsibility he clearly hadn't expected. Meanwhile, nestled safely in the patriarch's embrace, the little hero shut his eyes and pretended to be fast asleep, determined to look harmless enough to escape notice. The butler, however, didn't spare him a glance. He stood rigid and unreadable, his expression cold and calculating, as though already mentally arranging the next step of his plan. On the floor, the bound prisoner trembled and asked if he was free to go now. The patriarch didn't even bother looking his way, simply ordering his men to make the man disappear. The butler bowed his head slightly and accepted the command without hesitation. The desperate prisoner began pleading for his life as the group walked away, his cries echoing behind them. The young hero understood then that in a world like this, cuteness might be his strongest weapon, and he intended to wield it ruthlessly. The patriarch lifted him high afterward, seeming pleased by the innocent act, and the boy let himself look delighted, playing into the role perfectly. Moments later, his father stormed in again, grumbling about wasted resources and the absurdity of it all. The patriarch silenced him instantly, ordering him to return to his wife and stop embarrassing himself. With his temper still boiling, the man obeyed and left. Alone with his thoughts, the patriarch regarded the child in his arms and concluded that everything, absolutely everything, about the boy's future depended on how he performed from now on. Later that night, Yi carried the little one back to his room. The moment she opened the door, Shuang and Paio were already waiting, eyes sharp with worry, demanding to know what had happened downstairs. Once seated, he explained that the butler, quiet, loyal, stone-faced, the same man who'd served their family for years, had been behind the entire scheme from the beginning. The girls stared at him in stunned silence, unable to wrap their minds around the idea. Shuang reacted first. She shot to her feet, packing frantically and blurting out that they had to run, pack their things, escape immediately before they were all dragged into the fallout. Paio snatched her by the collar before she got too far, forcing her to calm down and reminding her that escape wasn't an option. They wouldn't even make it past the front gates. Shuang clenched her fists in frustration, declaring that if fleeing wasn't possible, then the only option left was to stand their ground and fight. Instantly, Yi and Paio grabbed her arms and dragged her back down, insisting that reckless heroics would get them all killed long before any plan could form. When quiet finally returned to the room, Paio turned to the young master and asked how on earth the three sisters could be so different when they'd grown up side by side. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he smiled softly as memories drifted behind his eyes. He said Yi had always taken care of the others, which naturally made her the most responsible and mature. Because of that, Shuang had been free to remain a little straightforward, a little impulsive, a little too innocent for her own good. And Sanson, he paused at her name, had always followed the two of them like a tiny echo, trying to keep up with the world at their pace. Paio listened quietly. Then she smiled, saying that the four of them together made something rare, a bond that felt more like destiny. She admitted she used to envy them for that closeness, but now she finally understood why Sanson had done what she did. And watching him now, she said softly that he too was finally beginning to understand. Hearing this made the little hero glow with pride, but he forced himself to focus. They needed a plan. He looked at the girls and asked what their next move should be now that they were safe, at least for the moment. Paio clapped her hands decisively and announced that it was time for a family meeting. The three sisters, who had been occupied on the floor, paused their game, looking up in confusion. Shuang challenged the fiancé immediately, demanding to know since when she had become family. The fiancé calmly countered that she was essentially their sister-in-law now and sought confirmation from little Sanson. This assertion instantly infuriated the sisters. In a swift, coordinated move, the sisters grabbed their brother and dragged him away from the group. They emphatically told him he had no need for a sister-in-law, promising him they would all stick together forever. Little Sanson was overwhelmed by the sudden outburst and speechless. Annoyed by the commotion, our hero sharply ordered all three of them to sit down, a command they instantly obeyed. The two older sisters settled down, cheeks puffed out, glaring stubbornly. Observing the whole exchange, the fiancé let out a burst of laughter. "Is it really that long since I disciplined you that you've become so unruly?" the MC asked, slightly irritated. His fiancée affectionately patted his head, suggesting, "You don't seem to understand them as well as you think." He quickly defended himself, stating he had raised them since they were infants and knew everything about them. She winked playfully, clarifying, "What you don't understand is women." This comment caused the three sisters' spirits to sink instantly, their faces showing total defeat. He bristled, telling the fiancée not to treat him like a child, reminding her of his true, much older age. The group finally settled on the floor to begin the family briefing. The fiancée explained that the path to true evolution was a secret controlled entirely by the noble clans. She revealed that families like theirs were merely instruments for this process, detailing that the first stage of evolution required consuming a special fruit. This fruit, she warned, grew only in hostile other worlds and was fiercely guarded by unimaginably powerful monsters, including actual dragons. Shuang's face darkened with anger, realizing this was equivalent to sending their brother to his doom. However, the MC's fiancé assured them that, thanks to their knowledge from the future, they were prepared. She concluded that by capitalizing on their respective strengths, their survival was possible, a point everyone reluctantly agreed upon. Later that evening, the hero's father entered the mansion, heavily intoxicated and deeply agitated. He stumbled alone through the grand hallways, making his way toward his wife's private quarters. He violently kicked the door open and barged in. The MC's mother was inside a small pool, accompanied by one of her maids. The sight of her husband filled the mother with fury. She ordered him out, disgusted by the smell of alcohol. In response, the husband lunged forward, attempting to kick her, but the quick-thinking maid interposed herself, managing to block the strike with her leg. The impact sent the maid tumbling into the pool water. The mother screamed at her husband, demanding an explanation for his aggression. He grabbed her roughly, calling her a vixen to her face. He was clearly driven by his grandfather's rigid decree, recalling the dark warning, "Nothing should be done to bring shame upon the family." He told his wife that regardless of their differences, his grandfather had ordered them to produce another child. Pulling her close, he asserted it had been too long since she had cared for him. He violently snatched the towel wrapped around her, leaving her exposed in the water. As the woman screamed in protest, he tore off his own shirt, stating flatly, "They're going to make more bobbies for the good of both their families." The two engaged in a forced, private moment in the pool, her feet curling reflexively in the water. Pio warned them that the upcoming trial wasn't something they could breeze through. If they weren't properly prepared, they wouldn't stand a chance. Hearing this, Yichen said they would have to split up. He would go retrieve the miraculous milk, his only reliable healing supply, while the black-haired maid announced she would head into town to buy whatever gear they would need. Yichen then turned to Shuang and Yi and asked them to keep a close eye on the mansion's butler. Both girls agreed immediately. They would watch him carefully, just to make sure he didn't try anything that could sabotage their plans. With that settled, Yichen prepared for his part of the mission. He strapped an empty milk storage bottle to his waist and walked straight to his mother's bedroom door. He started making little baby noises to get her attention, rehearsing his innocent act in his head. From inside the room, his father's irritated voice rang out, complaining loudly that the woman fought their son for milk every single day. Yichen found it baffling that the man still followed the patriarch's orders so obediently, even after everything that had happened, but he didn't have time to think about it. He needed to collect his healing supply now. He channeled his electric power, flickering into a streak of yellow lightning, and zipped straight through the door before either adult could react. He practically launched himself at his mother. Startled, the woman shrieked, asking what on earth the two of them were doing barging in like that when she was already trying to deal with a milk overflow. Shuang's father glared furiously, while Yichen's face dripped with the milk he had just managed to secure. A memory flickered in Yichen's mind of the patriarch, harshly scolding his father for wasting the family's resources on nothing but parties. His father had left that confrontation furious and humiliated, yet even then, he still bent under the pressure of his father's expectations. In that memory, Yichen remembered the absurd sight of the man leaning in to drink the breast milk too, prompting their mother to scream that both of them had completely lost their minds, and that their constant tug-of-war was driving her insane. Meanwhile, Shuang, Yi, and the black-haired maid made their way through town to buy equipment. When they reached the gear shop, a gigantic man blocked their entrance and growled at them to get lost, saying it wasn't a place for little brats. The black-haired maid agreed with her companion's annoyed huff, remarking that men like him always looked down on others. The comment made the shopkeeper snap. Red-faced with anger, he raised his fist to hit them without hesitation. But before he could make a move, a heavy bag flew across the room and slammed directly into his face. Coins burst across the counter, and the man staggered back with a bleeding nose, completely stunned. His attitude transformed instantly when he saw the pile of gleaming gold coins. Bowing and smiling awkwardly, he apologized and welcomed them with sudden politeness. The girls walked inside with confidence and told him to bring out the real merchandise, not the useless junk hidden on the shelves. Back at the mansion, the maids disguised their surveillance by pretending to clean the floors while quietly tailing the butler down the hallway. They followed him at a safe distance until he slipped into a restricted room. The two girls exchanged a quick look of uncertainty, then pressed their ears to the door to listen. Inside, the patriarch stood in the center of a complex magic circle that glowed with fiery energy. A massive red portal crackled open in front of him as he channeled his power. He spoke solemnly, saying that Yi Chen's talent was exceptional, and that only by undergoing a true trial could he surpass his limits. Yi Chen, overhearing from behind the doorway, understood immediately. The patriarch intended to eliminate everyone else so the family's new heir could rise without obstacles. Shuang stepped away from the door with a confident smile, promising she would take care of Yi Chen no matter what awaited them. A moment later, Pyao and the rest of the group gathered in front of the blazing red portal. Together, the children walked toward it, stepping into the unknown trial ahead. From far behind them, the patriarch and the butler observed silently. The old man's stern gaze held no warmth, but it was the butler whose expression shifted into something far darker, a curved, sinister smile revealing that beneath all the family's schemes, he still had a secret plan of his own. The moment the group stepped through the portal, they found themselves standing in a breathtaking world filled with glowing plants, floating pollen-like lights, and a shimmering lake perched on top of a mountain ridge. The girls were instantly mesmerized by the beauty before them, and Shuang couldn't hold back her awe, whispering that this other world was far more gorgeous than anything she had imagined. Yi Chen, however, didn't let the scenery distract him. He reminded everyone in a firm tone that a place this beautiful was almost certainly dangerous, and none of them could afford to lower their guard. Sanson tugged gently on his sleeve, asking where the evolution fruit was supposed to be. Yi Chen explained that the fruit would always be guarded, and their job was to find the creature responsible for protecting it. He also thanked Sanson for keeping communication between the teams smooth and organized. Yi then lifted the hem of her dress slightly to reveal several bottles filled with milk, strapped neatly to her thigh like a makeshift utility belt. She pulled one free, tossed it onto the ground, and the bottle shattered, spreading milk across the glowing soil. Immediately, the group split into their assigned positions. Yi Chen and Pyro slipped behind a massive boulder close to the lake's edge, keeping low as the light from the water danced across the rocks. On the other side, Shuang and the black-haired maid tucked themselves behind another stone slab, waiting in absolute silence for the plan to unfold. The milk seeped into the earth, and within moments, Yi Chen received a quick mental alert from Pyro telling him they had movement. Ripples spread across the lake, followed by bubbling waves, and everyone knew instantly that their bait had worked. The Guardian was approaching. A massive purple serpent burst from the water, its armored scales glittering like amethyst plates and its blue eyes glowing with intelligence. It glided forward, staring hungrily at the spilled milk along the shore. A notification flashed before Yi Chen's eyes, identifying the creature as an A-rank venomous serpent. Shuang scoffed confidently, insisting that they had already beaten a rank B, so this would be nothing. Yi Chen nearly choked on air, calling her insane in a hushed whisper, and pointing out that the power difference between A and B rank was an entire world apart. Before the girls could argue further, Pyao quietly noted that Yi Chen seemed unusually familiar with rare beasts. He admitted that his innate talent had always been low, so he'd studied relentlessly during his past life to survive long enough to protect his sisters. The memory of him fighting alone, training through blood and desperation, flickered briefly in his mind. The girls grew silent with emotion, and even in the dim light their eyes shimmered with tears. Then Yi signaled him again, pointing urgently at something on the serpent's head. Yi Chen finally saw it clearly and nearly stopped breathing. The evolution fruit, glowing like a tiny golden sun, was growing right on top of the serpent's skull. Their entire strategy crumbled in an instant. Sneaking in to steal the fruit was impossible. Shuang suggested draining the serpent's life bit by bit with her vine ability, but Yi Chen shot down the idea immediately. The beast was far too strong and far too fast. They wouldn't last long enough for the effect to matter. The serpent suddenly reared back and let out a tremendous roar at the scent of milk. Before any of them could move, it slammed its head into the sand and swallowed the crushed bottle whole, along with half the ground around it. Yi Chen watched the scene unfold, and then a sudden spark of inspiration flashed in his eyes. He announced that he had a new plan and urgently recorded a voice message for everyone, outlining the risky strategy he had pieced together from studying the serpent's behavior. One by one, the group confirmed they understood. As they waited for the right moment, Pyao glanced at Yi Chen curiously and wondered aloud how he had gained the girls' trust so easily. Yi Chen's expression softened. He explained that in his darkest moments, they had been the ones who saved him from despair. They had given him a reason to live when he had none. He vowed that since he failed them once in the past, he would risk everything now to protect them properly. Pyro looked at him with quiet admiration, touched by the sincerity behind his words, and told him that meeting them in this life was something she considered an honor. Yi Chen straightened his back with fierce determination blazing across his face, and declared that it was time to move. The moment his voice rang out, all the girls responded in perfect unison, their voices carrying the same resolve. Without hesitation, he and Pyro sprinted toward the lakeside to draw the serpent's attention, while Shuang and Yi split off in another direction to carry out their part of the distraction. Even little Sanson darted off with surprising precision, slipping into a safe position exactly as planned. Across the shimmering water, the massive serpent surveyed its surroundings with slow, deliberate movements. the evolution fruit on its head radiating like a small sun against its armored scales. Its gaze drifted toward the pool of milk glistening on the sand. The enticing scent of essence wafted toward it, and although it resisted for a moment, instinct quickly overpowered caution. It lowered its head, stared harder at the bait, and then, without warning, launched forward at full speed. The creature's head slammed into the lakeshore with a thunderous crack before it lifted its jaws and swallowed the spilled milk along with a good chunk of stone. The serpent's attention snapped toward another patch of liquid glistening between the bushes. Seizing that opening, Yi-Chen and Pio bolted across the terrain, clutching fresh bottles of milk to continue baiting the beast. A notification flickered across their systems as the sisters enthusiastically praised their younger brother's brilliant plan. Shuang and Yi rushed out with even more bottles, keeping the momentum of the strategy alive. The serpent struck again, devouring another splash of milk and sending tremors across the ground. Shuang groaned through the shared message channel, furious over the tragic waste of perfectly good milk. Before Yi-Chen could answer, Pio's voice cut sharply into the thread, urging everyone to look at the creature's belly. Shuang squinted toward the water, growing uneasy as she saw the serpent's abdomen grotesquely bulging from everything it had swallowed. She muttered that something about this felt too smooth, too convenient. Yi-Chen acknowledged her suspicion but insisted that survival took priority. The rest would follow once they had an opening. By now the serpent had begun thrashing in the water, sluggish and disoriented. Yi-Chen remarked, almost offhandedly, that without improvisational plans like this, he would have been long dead in his previous life. Pio, however, kept her focus razor-sharp, reminding everyone that the monster was slowing down and they couldn't waste this chance. On her signal, the three maids crouched low and prepared for the next stage of the plan. But before they could act, a strange disturbance rippled through the ground. Something cold and sentient began clawing its way out of Yi-Chen's shadow. A figure emerged, a man in a suit moving with eerie silence, his arm raised to strike. Pio reacted first, her instincts snapping into place as she hurled her vine-like ability toward Yi-Chen, dragging him backward just as the shadowy figure lunged. The attack skimmed past him, and Yi-Chen's heart dropped in recognition. The butler's face, twisted with obsession, emerged from the darkness, and Yi-Chen demanded to know how he had followed them. Pio's eyes widened in horror as she pieced it together. This version of him wasn't real. This was a divine awakening manifestation. In a sudden flashback, the patriarch's calm face resurfaced, explaining that Yi-Chen's incredible talent required a true trial. Meanwhile, the butler had stepped into the shadows at the exact moment the children left, revealing the truth. What stood before them now was no man, but a shadow clone. The clone glared at Yi-Chen with pure hatred, stating flatly that he had come to avenge his son. He added almost proudly that if not for his interference, the children might have actually survived this challenge. Yi-Chen and Pio didn't waste another second. With deadly synchronization, he summoned his lightning while Pio wrapped her thorny vines through it, producing a crackling spear infused with violent energy. The combined attack shot toward the butler's clone with destructive force, slicing through the air like a divine strike, only to pass cleanly through the clone's body. Both of them froze, stunned. The shadowy figure flickered for a moment, then dissolved slowly into darkness, sliding back into the ground as though it had never been there at all. Yi-Chen and Pio stared at the empty space, their minds racing to understand what had happened. The shadow clone slipped back into the darkness and surged toward them again, gliding through the ground like liquid night, but Pio reacted instantly. She seized Yi-Chen by the collar and vaulted away, landing just in time for a violent explosion to erupt behind them. The blast shook the entire valley, sending a shockwave that rippled across the glowing landscape. Far in the distance, Shuang and Yi froze, their systems lighting up with frantic messages as they panicked over their brother and Pio's sudden disappearance. The thunderous noise was impossible to ignore. Even the massive serpent, which had been sluggishly circling the lake, jerked its head toward the explosion. Its glowing blue eyes locked onto Yi-Chen and Pio standing amid the rising smoke. Before they could even catch their breath, the butler's shadowy double materialized again, his form barely solid as he hissed that they would all pay for what happened to his son. Then, just like before, he dissolved back into nothingness. Only this time, the serpent took his presence as a direct provocation. Its fury flared, and the creature surged toward them with murderous intent. Forced into motion, Yi-Chen and Pio sprinted across the uneven terrain, the serpent's colossal body slithering after them so close that Yi-Chen felt the rush of wind each time its jaws snapped shut behind them. The monster was undeniably fast, but now slowed just enough by the milk-heavy weight in its belly that they could barely stay ahead of it. Even so, a message suddenly flickered across their view, ordering them to split. There was no time to question it. As they sprinted, the serpent reared back and expelled a spray of venom in a deadly arc. Yi-Chen and Pio slapped their palms together mid-run to generate the force they needed to propel themselves apart just before the venom hit. The purple liquid splashed across the earth and instantly burned a deep trench into the ground, hissing violently as it spread between them and cut them off from each other. Separated, Yi-Chen felt panic spike in his chest as he watched the serpent swing its enormous head toward him. The creature lowered its jaw, preparing to swallow him whole, and for a heartbeat he believed that this was truly the end. Pyo's alarmed expression mirrored that same fear, but before despair could fully take hold, a brilliant flash burst across the battlefield. One of his sisters had hurled a radiant bird flash bomb and shouted for him to shut his eyes. Yi-Chen reacted immediately, clamping them shut as the crystal detonated. A blinding surge of white light flooded the entire lakeside. Even Pyo groaned, covering her eyes from the overwhelming brightness, and the serpent shrieked in agony, thrashing wildly as its vision was seared away. Seizing the tiny window of opportunity, Yi sprinted straight toward Yi-Chen. She swept him up in her arms before the light had even fully faded and bolted away from the serpent's snapping jaws. Behind them, the monster's roar grew so loud that the ground vibrated beneath their feet. Pyo stumbled, covering her ears as the deafening sound tore through the air, while Shuang fought to stay upright, shielding her younger brother from the worst of the noise. Yi-Chen felt the reverberation crash against his small body like a wave, but before he could even brace himself, a new voice message chimed into their shared channel, sharp, urgent, and unmistakable. Someone had finally identified the opening they needed, and the message was clear. Hit the serpent's swollen belly, now. Yi-Chen seized the brief moment of chaos and sent out a sharp mental order for everyone to concentrate their attacks on the serpent's swollen belly. Yi immediately synced her energy with his, and together they unleashed a blistering double thunderspear blast that tore through the air and struck the creature's weakest point. The attack detonated against its underside with a violent crackle, sending arcs of electricity racing across its scales. Shuang didn't hesitate. She raised her A-rank weapon, releasing its full potential in a brilliant surge of power that slammed into the monster right after the thunder spear. Sanson followed, drawing back her divine bow until the red aura around it deepened, then fired a barrage of sharp, piercing arrows that screamed through the air and buried themselves into the serpent's already wounded flesh. Pyo contributed her own power, weaving her ability directly into the storm of attacks. All of their combined force collided into the monster in a single cataclysmic blast. The explosion shook the entire forest, scattering glowing leaves and dust across the valley. When the shockwave settled, the group stood hunched over and gasping, drained of strength. Ahead of them lay the colossal serpent sprawled motionless on the ground, its belly torn open in a massive gash. Shuang and Yi stared at the body in disbelief, exchanging breathless whispers about how surprisingly easy it had been to bring down a powerful A-rank guardian. Pyo, however, shot them a warning look and reminded them that their victory had only been possible because they'd used precious, high-level equipment they were lucky to have. Even so, Sanson didn't look convinced. She kept her gaze fixed on the monster with suspicion tightening her features. Yi-Chen's expression sharpened as a sudden awareness prickled up his spine. Something didn't feel right. He told them all to stay alert. Intelligent A-rank beasts rarely died without a final trick. His intuition proved right a heartbeat later. The serpent's corpse twitched, and before anyone could react, the massive creature sprung upright with terrifying speed and lunged straight for Yi and Shuang. Shuang froze, staring helplessly at the enormous shadow rising over her. Yi-Chen didn't hesitate. He hurled himself in front of her, lightning exploding across his body as he slammed his power upward to intercept the incoming jaws. A harsh crack split the air as he forced all his strength against the serpent's open maw. Then the beast bit down. Electricity erupted around Yi-Chen as the serpent's venomous fangs closed over him and began electrocuting his small body. Yi and Shuang screamed, their faces twisted in terror as they watched him being swallowed into the monster's mouth. Even Pyro was stunned, unable to process how quickly the situation had turned. But it was Sanson's voice that shattered the paralysis. She shrieked her brother's name with a force that cut through everything, throwing herself into the air as she commanded her sisters to attack immediately. The urgency in her tone snapped Yi and Shuang back into motion. Rage ignited in their eyes, and together they launched themselves at the serpent with reckless, desperate determination. Sensing danger, the injured monster began slithering away, dragging itself across the sand in a frantic attempt to flee toward the water. Pyo shot her thorned vines forward, the red tendrils lashing around the serpent's tail to chain it down. For a second, it looked like she'd caught it, but the creature whipped its body once, and the vines snapped apart like threads. Yi's eyes flared blue as she activated her wind ability. Gale Step surged beneath her feet, and she used the burst of momentum to catapult Shuang forward like a missile. Shuang soared across the battlefield, her hands closing around the serpent's tail with astonishing strength. Muscles trembling, she dug in her heels and forced the monster to a halt. The serpent jerked in shock, surprised that anyone could restrain it at all. Shuang let out a raw scream for Sanson to strike now. Her sister didn't waste a second. She shot past them with her red blade raised, shouting for Yi-Chen to hold on as she prepared to slash. But before she reached the serpent's spine, Shuang felt a horrifying shift beneath her hands. The serpent's tail detached like a lizard shedding its limb, cleanly severed, leaving her clutching nothing but bloody scales. Freed from her grip, the monster surged forward in a final desperate escape. Its massive body crashed toward the lake, and with one last heave it hurled itself into the water, vanishing beneath the glowing surface before any of them could catch it. Silence fell. Then it broke with the sound of three voices rising into frantic, heart-tripped screams. Shuang, Shuang, Yi, and Sanson all collapsed to their knees at the water's edge, tears streaming down their faces as they cried out for their brother, begging for him to answer, terrified that he had just been dragged to his death. The group stood frozen at the lake's edge, staring at the water with dread hollowing out their chests. For a long moment, nothing moved, until a wide pool of dark purple blood slowly blossomed across the surface, spreading like ink. That gruesome stain made the girls' hearts drop even further, while Paio watched with a tense, irritated calm, as if ready to scold fate itself for taking a bad turn. Believing their brother had truly been swallowed and lost, the three sisters collapsed to their knees. Shuang Shuang buried her face in her hands, Yi trembled uncontrollably, and Sanson's quiet sobbing shook her entire body. All three cried without restraint, mourning the little boy they believed had just been devoured alive. Then suddenly, a message appeared. Yi Chen's voice lit up their system interface. "I'm alive. Protection gems saved me." Everything shattered at once. The tears, the despair, the grief, they all turned into a burst of hope so intense that all three girls jumped to their feet and shouted his name at the blood-stained lake. Their voices echoed desperately, full of relief and fear at the same time. Deep beneath the surface, the massive serpent, wounded, frantic, and bleeding heavily, dragged itself through the lake's depths in a sluggish retreat. Inside its stomach, Yi Chen was still alive, drenched in thick acid and half-dissolved goo, desperately trying to figure out what to do. Sanson sent him a frantic message insisting he use his divine reincarnation ability immediately. Yi Chen hesitated, unsure, until Sanson pushed harder, explaining that it was his only chance. Yi, confused, asked how that ability even worked. Yi Chen explained grimly that reincarnation required a woman's belly as the host in order for him to be reborn. All three sisters instantly volunteered, talking over each other, each one ready to sacrifice herself without hesitation. Paio let out a long, exasperated sigh and called them idiots for how reckless they were being. Then she lifted her chin and stated flatly that she was the oldest, and his fiancée, so she would do it herself. She told Yi Chen to hurry before the chance slipped away. Yi Chen accepted her decision and warned her he'd cause serious destruction inside the serpent before coming out. He sucked in a deep breath, braced every muscle in his tiny body, and activated his divine awakening, martial mode. Thunder bloomed violently. Lightning erupted from him in a continuous explosion that lit up the serpent's insides. Yi Chen unleashed an infinite thunder ray directly into the creature's organs, blasting through flesh, bone, and scale until the beam tore clean out the serpent's back, leaving a gaping hole. The entire lake rumbled as the monster writhed in agony from the electric devastation coursing through its body. But then a warning flashed across everyone's system screens. The distance for reincarnation was about to exceed the limit. Yi Chen gritted his teeth and forced himself to continue. His whole body shook from the effort as he channeled more energy, even when strange black sludge rose up his throat. He refused to stop, pushing through pain so intense his vision blurred. Above the water, Shuang Shuang began asking why nothing was happening yet. Sanson checked the system and immediately panicked. The distance was nearly maxed out. The three sisters shouted desperately for him to hurry, screaming his name at the water. Yi Chen, still trapped in the acidic darkness, pushed out one final, devastating surge of power. His system chimed a harsh warning. His body was at its absolute limit and reincarnation must occur immediately. The serpent convulsed violently at the bottom of the lake, massive electric bursts tearing it apart from the inside. But just as Yi Chen prepared to activate his ability, a final notification cut through everything. Reincarnation range exceeded, ability no longer available. Sanson's heart shattered. She screamed that he was too far and sobbed that she didn't know what to do anymore. Before they could even think, Paio suddenly dove straight into the lake with a forceful splash. The three sisters gasped, frozen for a heartbeat, and then screamed her name, and Yi Chen's toward the churning water. Ripples spread across the lake as silence strangled the world around them. Then bubbles rose. A moment later, Paio burst out of the water alone, coughing and clawing at the surface for air. The sisters stared in shock as she struggled to swim back to shore. They rushed to her side, dragging her out of the lake as she collapsed onto the sand, shaking. Breathless and pale, Paio looked around wildly and demanded to know where Yi Chen was, her voice breaking as she asked whether he had made it into her body in time. The moment Paio staggered onto the shore, clutching her stomach, the girls realized something was terribly wrong. Her body tightened, trembling violently as she let out a raw, agonized scream. Sanson froze in panic, staring at her sisters with wide, helpless eyes and asking if either of them had any idea what to do. Yi and Shuang Shuang could only shake their heads, equally horrified and completely clueless. A sudden message from Yi Chen appeared on their system screens, telling them, of all things, to spread Paio's legs. Paio, drenched in sweat and barely able to breathe, shrieked at them to hurry and just do it now. The sisters scrambled into place, trying to help her through waves of pain that were far beyond anything she had imagined. Pio writhed on the ground, clutching the dirt, her voice hoarse from screaming. And then, through all that agony, something finally emerged. Yichen's tiny, reborn body slipped out from between her legs, covered in faint golden light and serpent goo, but unmistakably alive. The three sisters cried out his name at once, relief flooding through them so abruptly that their legs nearly gave out. Pio collapsed backward, panting heavily, muttering that giving birth, especially to him, was absolutely insane. Yi carefully scooped the newborn up, looking at the tiny figure in her hands and wondering aloud if all Bobbies were this unbelievably small. Sanson quickly explained that he wasn't fully developed yet, which made Shuang worry even more. Before she could spiral into panic, Yichen activated his reincarnation growth skill. His little body began to glow fiercely with golden radiance, filling the air with a warm shimmer. When the light faded, he lay in Yi's arms, noticeably larger but still weak. He tried to speak, but only managed soft, frustrated babbles. Sanson and Shuang leaned in close, trying to decipher what he wanted, while Yi's expression shifted from concern to outright fear as his body suddenly shifted color, his skin turning an alarming shade of purple. Yichen trembled uncontrollably. Sanson's eyes widened as realization struck her, and she shouted that he needed milk immediately. Shuang yanked a baby bottle from their supplies and pushed it toward him, but panic grew when he couldn't even muster the strength to drink. His limbs shook helplessly. Their little brother was fatting fast. Thinking quickly, Yi grabbed the bottle and, to Shuang's utter shock, drank all the milk herself. Before her sister could even protest, Yi leaned down and transferred the nourishment mouth to mouth. A surge of yellow lightning crackled across Yichen's body as the energy hit him, restoring his strength in an instant. His skin returned to normal, his trembling stopped, and he let out a soft exhale. Shuang and Sanson nearly tackled them both in relief, shouting and crying and laughing at the same time. Yichen let out a tired groan, muttering in exhaustion that the experience had been way too close for comfort. Yi hugged him so tightly he almost disappeared in her arms, her tears soaking into his hair. The group stood together before the lake, surrounded by glowing plants and strange, otherworldly creatures. Yichen thanked Pio for bringing him back into the world, and Pio, still catching her breath, managed a small smile as she reminded him she was his fiancée, part of his family whether the sisters liked it or not. Shuang and Sanson declared loudly that they would grow stronger as fast as possible, just so he wouldn't have to keep worrying about them. Pio found their stubbornness both amusing and endearing, though she quickly shifted back into a serious tone, telling everyone to start gathering the loot so they could deal with the butler next. Their loot was the enormous purple serpent lying in a heap on the ground, the very beast that had nearly killed Yichen. Standing beside it, Yichen, now looking noticeably older after the reincarnation boost, held a glowing golden flower in his hand. When he asked what their next move should be, Pio didn't hesitate. She urged him to eat the flower and evolve immediately. Yi voiced some concern about the risks, but still agreed that this was their best chance to power up before confronting the butler again. Just hearing the word butler made all three sisters stiffen in anger and fear, remembering how close he had come to destroying their family. Yichen met their eyes, steady and determined, and confirmed that they would deal with the old traitor once and for all. With that resolve, he lifted the golden flower to his lips and ate it. A powerful burst of yellow energy erupted from him, engulfing his entire body in a radiant, overwhelming glow.